There was a downed aircraft recovery team that was on site that was supposed to be prepping the aircraft for us. Well, when we got there into the objective area, I quickly realized that plan wasn't going to work because the aircraft had rolled over on its right side, but there were just pieces of fiberglass all over the landing zone. And so I knew I can't go hover up here and land because I'm going to suck all those pieces of fiberglass up into my rotor system, and then we're going to have two downed aircraft. We had to change the plan in the zone. So picked up, get over there, hooked up. Hovering was terrible. I had no reference, so I was basically just flying off what my crew chiefs were telling me. I'll never forget, my crew chief yelled, he's like, "Holy shit, it's working."
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm AJ Pasciuti, a retired Marine, Force Recon, Scout Sniper, and Marine Gunner with 21 years of service, multiple combat tours, and a lifetime of lessons learned in the arena itself. On this show, I sit down with warriors from every front line to uncover what combat truly feels like and how it shapes the way we see life, each other, and ourselves. This is Combat Story. Today on Combat Story, we're joined by Lieutenant Colonel Isaac G. Lee, United States Marine Corps, retired, a Marine Corps combat aviator who spent 2 decades in the cockpit and deployed 7 times, including 4 combat tours in the Middle East. Isaac is the author of Hangar 4, a combat aviator's memoir, a candid look at the grind behind Marine aviation, the training pipeline, the ready room pressure, and what it's like flying combat missions in the CH-53 community, where the heavy lift mission mattered every day in Iraq and Afghanistan. But what really stood out in this conversation wasn't just the aircraft or the deployments. It was leadership, Isaac's humility and the way he consistently credits the people around him, and his steady commitment to serving his teammates first, especially when things were hard, mistakes happened, and the mission still had to move forward. It's the kind of perspective you only get from someone who's lived the job and who's carried the responsibility. This is Combat Story. All right, everyone, thank you so much and welcome back to Combat Story. Once again, my name is AJ Pasciuti, and I'm excited to be sitting down here with my new friend, Isaac Lee, Lieutenant Colonel, USMC, retired. Isaac Lee was a CH-53 pilot for 7 deployments, 4 combat tours, if I'm not mistaken, and he's the author of this book, Hangar 4, and I'm really excited to, you can see I took a bunch of notes inside of it. I'm super excited to have a conversation. I think one of the funnier parts about aviation versus ground is I think aviators are a little bit more organized, and ground guys, this looks like I was taking notes out of the Da Vinci Code. But very much welcome to the show, Isaac. It's really happy to see you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this has been fun. So this, I get to read a lot of books that a lot of people write, and with any one of these things, sometimes they can be self-aggrandizing, right. Sometimes they can be a very much like, what do we call, like PME or professional military education. This was a nostalgic journey. You and I were in a lot of the same places at a lot of the same times, but I felt the way that you described this book and the stories inside of them were extremely authentic. Can you talk a little bit about what the genesis was as to why you wrote the book in the first place?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a nerd, so I kept a journal the entire time I was in the Marine Corps. I used to get made fun of about that quite often. But for some reason, I started it when I went to officer candidate school, really just thinking, to me, the drill instructors were hilarious. And I wanted to write down everything they said because I knew I would never remember it. That's how it started. And then thankfully, I just kept going. And I was particularly good about it on deployments, especially in combat deployments, because there wasn't anything else to do. And so I found it to be like a very effective way to decompress in the evenings. So I would do that before I hit the rack, whatever time of day that happened to be. And I was really organized about it. So it was all electronic, and I had it. So got out of the Marine Corps. Yeah, got out of the Marine Corps in 2017. And it was just sitting on my computer at home, and I'd kind of forgotten about it, honestly. And then a few years went by, and it was 2021. I just started hearing more and more about Marines I knew that I was close with or had served with that were having a hard time. In different ways, some guys had, drinking problems, marriage issues, couldn't hold down a job. And I knew right away, I knew what was bothering them. I knew what was wrong with them because I had some of those same experiences, right? And I initially was just reaching out kind of as a friend, or really just trying to be a friend. Hey, man, you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? I know about this resource or that resource. And eventually just came to the conclusion that if I wrote my story in a really honest way, it might actually be helpful to them. And that's the thing that gave me what I needed to actually sit down and do it. Because prior to that, I'm sure like most former Marines or military in general, the idea of writing a book just is like, no, come on, get over yourself. Who cares, right? Like no one cares.
You're like, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Like, who are you to write a book?
Exactly.
Right?
Who are you? But that helped me kind of move past that, and knowing that it might be helpful to someone else gave me what I needed to do it. And then kind of a secondary motivation for me was no one had written about the 53 community at all since Vietnam. And because just by virtue of timing and the places I got to go and the things I experienced, I knew if I told my story, I would in some way be capturing a big piece of that history as well for the community. And so that was kind of a secondary motivation that worked out as well. But that's really a long version of how I got to the point where I sat down and wrote this thing.
Man, well, I tell you what, like it is authentic.
Yeah, thank you.
And as another Marine who we've been in a lot of the same places, the way that you describe like just brings back like a visceral feeling. There's, when trying to write and describe a story or an area, the way that you describe the smells, the sights, the sounds, that's what brings me back.
Right.
And also one of my favorite aspects of the book is how you provide a soundtrack. So not only a soundtrack to the moment, but also a soundtrack to what you were listening to at the time. Can you describe a little bit about that process?
Yeah, of course. So I listen to music all the time. And so in my mind, as I was writing this book, there was a soundtrack to this story. And so what I did originally when I wrote like the first draft is I had a song for each chapter that was something I was listening to at the time, but also directly related to something that was happening in that chapter.
Yeah.
So song title, artist, and then the line from the song that was applicable. Then when I got in the publishing process, I quickly learned like, hey, you can't do that. You can't quote the actual line from the song. You can only list the artist and the song title. That's it. And I was like, okay, well, then I guess we just need to get rid of it. And they actually it was their suggestion. They said, no, just make a soundtrack or playlist and put it in the back of the book. So it still lives somewhere. And interestingly, I've been asked about that quite a few times since the book came out. Like, hey, how'd you come up with this idea to do this? And why did you do it? But that's really it. It was kind of my soundtrack to that story and to that book at the applicable time.
Dude, I completely love it. And how you relate it to specific moments and times. There are songs, that you've placed in there. And I can literally imagine you reciting that song or playing that song in your mind as you're going to do something, right? And then the idea of being able to place it in the back of the book and on your website. I saw that you have a Spotify playlist. We will include that in the links down below so people can check out your Spotify playlist because it is rad, as you go through
thank
it. But super fun, read all together. So with that, what I really like to talk about is a little bit of your kind of origin story, right? Your genesis of how because one of the things that we like to highlight on the show is that this service is a journey that a lot of us have dealt with. A little bit of self-doubt, a little bit of wanting to prove ourselves, the reasons why, and sometimes it's very, very different for people. So what were the initial thoughts of wanting to join the military and then the Marine Corps?
Well, it's interesting that I came to that conclusion. It was definitely not something that was scripted for me. So I grew up in Lubbock, Texas. My dad was a high school football coach. So basically call it a D-list celebrity in our hometown.
I don't know. I mean, I've heard about football in Texas. I don't know that D-list is...
It was a big deal. But I personally played baseball, football, but the focus at our house was always sports. And the expectation was you got good grades because you were supposed to, but sports was like the thing. And everything in our home kind of functioned around that. But when it got time for me to go to college, I went to college, honestly, because I felt like I was supposed to. I didn't really want to. I wasn't passionate about studying any particular thing. So I went, and I also came to the conclusion at that time, and this was a pretty mature decision to make. I realized I was a pretty good baseball player, but not a good enough baseball player to play for a Major League Baseball team. And that was a big pill to swallow, but I knew I needed to figure out another path because if I did not, I didn't want to just end up one more guy banging around West Texas that used to be good at high school sports.
Uncle Rico, right?
Exactly.
I used to be able to throw a football over that mountain, right?
So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew what I didn't want to do.
Sure.
That's how it started. So I was going through the motions in college, thankfully making good grades because I knew that would be my ticket to something. I just wasn't sure what the something was. And then we got to a point there It was the summer after my junior year in college. I was doing an internship and I hated it. And I went out to my parents' house one night after this internship. My dad's sitting in the driveway drinking a screwdriver like he always did in the summertime. And from their driveway, you could see the landing pattern at Reese Air Force Base, which was on the outskirts of Lubbock and was a training base, T-37s, T-38s.
So what's a T-37?
It was just a little Air Force trainer jet
Okay.
at the time. And Reese had always been there, but we didn't really spend any time. You know, we went to an air show every now and then, but I never once had it cross my mind.
It was more like background
to
noise.
be in the military,
Okay.
right? But I started having this conversation with my dad. I'm telling him, like, you know, I don't know, like, I don't want to do this. I hate I hate this internship. I hate what I'm studying. And he's getting annoyed. In fairness, he's getting annoyed. And then the conversation escalates to this point where he's like, okay, well, what are you going to do? And I just pointed at those aircraft and the landing pattern and said, I'm going to do that. And he's like, he looked at me like, what? And they're like, you're going to do what? And I just said, I'm going to be a pilot in the military. I didn't know anything about how to do that
So,
when I made that comment.
How did you?
Nothing.
You just like saw it. Was like, that sounds pretty cool.
It just in that moment, and I'd sort of low key thought about the military for a long time. Like, man, that might make sense for me. And I sort of had this general idea that the thing I missed about sports, I might find in the military, which is really just being part of a team. Yeah. But it was just an idea that I had as a 20-year-old. I didn't know for sure if that would be the case, but I suspected it might. And I was looking at those aircraft, and just in that moment, I was like, I want to do that. That looks pretty cool.
Yep.
And my dad looked at me like it was the dumbest thing I'd ever said, which was a fair reaction. And he just got up and went in the house. He didn't say, you can't do that, or he didn't say anything. He just went in the house. And in that moment, I was like, I'm doing this. I'm going to figure this out. And I had no idea what I was doing or how to go about it, but I just decided I'm going to figure this out. So I started doing the homework, go talk, Air Force, Navy, Marine, go talk to everybody, start learning. And I'm telling people, hey, this is what I want to do. Almost the only person I think I told that didn't tell me, you can't do that or you're crazy was my mother. I think she was the one person that was like, sure, go for it. Everyone else,
thanks, Mom.
Yeah, everyone else I told was, you can't do that. You know how hard that is. You're not smart enough to do that. And then every time someone told me that, I got more motivated to pull it off. So I kind of took on this like me against the world mentality of I'm going to figure this out. Like,
as a young adolescent,
yes.
Younger adult male. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like turning 21 years old and I'm like, yeah, you watch, I'm going to make this happen. And then thankfully I had an uncle at the time. He's still my uncle. I haven't seen him in a long time. He's married to my dad's sister. He was the only Marine I knew. And he was an enlisted Marine. And I hadn't seen him in a while, but they came through town to visit. And right away, he's like, hey, heard you're interested in being a pilot in the military. And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, why don't you be a pilot in the Marine Corps? And honestly, when he first said it, I was intimidated just because the Marine Corps in your mind is like so hardcore.
Sure.
And I had a little doubt. I was like, I don't know if I'm quite tough enough to do that. And he's like, no, just give it a shot. So he connected me with an officer selection officer who, of course, is a good, like any good Marine, was all over it. 2 days later, some sergeants got me out on a field at Texas Tech University, running a PFT, taking the flight aptitude test. Thankfully, I was in shape.
Well, you had checked all the boxes at that. I mean, like, you were like a wet dream for an OSO, right? College athlete, right? Good grades, physically fit, motivated, a little chip on their shoulder, right? Like just walk right in. Come on.
Yeah. So I did all the required things and submitted an application. And like 2 days later, he called me back and said, hey, you're a slam dunk. This is going to happen. So get ready to go. And then it just worked out. So it all came together. But that process was long because I basically spent my entire senior year of school talking all the different branches and trying to whittle down my choices. So I ended up graduating from college in the summer of 96 and then went to OCS in the summer of 97. So I had that last year was checking all the boxes for the Marine Corps, and then off I went.
No kidding. So, I do remember reading, your foreword of your book, and to me was almost like a love letter to the Marines.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
It was so well written. So the words that I wrote down on my little sticky here is the message behind it, how much it resonated with me.
Yeah.
And it showed the reality, I think, of the service, specifically to the Marine Corps. And I was just blown away by that. And so when you continued on, you stepped into this new realm. You go to OCS in the summer and Quantico in the summer is a special kind of hell.
Yep.
Can you describe a little bit more what OCS was
Yeah,
like?
and I was totally out of my element. I'd never been anywhere that green. It was hot. It was humid. I mean, I always thought of Houston as the most hot, humid place on earth. Quantico was equally as bad, I felt like, that summer. But I was just totally determined, like, I'm going to pull this off. And, of course, I felt like I'm not the fastest guy here. I'm not the smartest. Like, everyone there is very impressive. But my going in strategy was keep a low profile, pay attention to everyone around you, figure out like who the good guys are, and then just do whatever they're doing. Like, just keep your mouth shut and mimic the people that look like they're doing it. That was literally my plan.
Pretty good rules. Yeah.
And I figured if I did that for a few weeks, then I would catch on, and it worked. Like, it got me through.
Yeah. Did the drill instructors at OCS, did they treat you different as an officer candidate than they would at a boot camp for an enlisted?
My understanding is the only real difference is they won't take us out and like thrash us in the pit, but everything else is the same.
You don't get thrashed in OCS?
No, not in the pit, but they just try to PT you to death. So what I've been told since then by drill instructors and people who have done it is the PT is a little more intense at OCS, but you don't get the special individual harassment package of
incentivized training.
Yeah, no incentivized training. And a little more academics. So it's basically PTL morning, classroom all afternoon, and then, just house games all evening.
Yeah.
Until it's time to go to bed.
Dude, that's great. Okay, so OCS seems like you kind of kept your head down, moved through OCS pretty well. And then after that, we go to the infamous, TBS, right? So the basic school.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your time at
TBS, the big suck, we called it. So 6-month infantry officer program. Every Marine Corps officer goes there first before they go to their MOS school. And I personally think it's a very intelligent thing that the Marine Corps created that school. Just a quick jump ahead. But later when we got to flight school, I realized that school had been very valuable because for that 6 months, the Marine Corps has these brand new lieutenants isolated out in Quantico and basically unscrews them before anyone else can see them or interact with them, which is a great program. Had a great platoon commander, Randy Soriano, Marine captain, infantry officer. I love that guy to this day. We're still in touch. Just an awesome human being, great motivator. And Randy's approach to us as his new lieutenants was, we were going to be the hardest platoon in the whole damn company.
Sounds
right?
like a grunt.
Yeah, and he was just going to thrash us until we got there. But I actually really enjoyed the method is madness to the point where I, at one point, really considered handing off my flight contract and trying to be an infantry officer. I was really thinking about it. He almost convinced me, but kind of at the 11th hour, I was like, you know what, you have this flight contract. This was your original idea. See that through. Sure. Like, go give that a shot. Sure. And so I stayed with it, but it was a great experience. 6 months of the basic school and then off to flight school.
One of the things that I think, obviously it's very different that the Marine Corps as a service requires that of every officer going through, their own pipeline. I think for me, as a ground guy, what it allows is perspective. I think what it does for specifically, like even like an aviator, right? So an aviation contract, you get a taste of 6 months of what it's like to be a grunt. You know what we can see, what we can't see, what our lives are like, what every aspect of our daily routine looks like, which I think provides a little bit more buy-in this is my perspective as an aviator, because you have lived that, you have done that. It is not foreign to you. It is something that it is a flat line across the board. Every single Marine understands that the job is to support the young infantry Marine taking whatever objective they have. And then now, having lived that, you get a little bit more perspective as you go through that for the rest of your career.
Yeah, it was great and became very helpful to me, and really was one of the big reasons I ended up on the path to becoming a helicopter pilot, vice fixed wing, and ultimately assault support. Was every Marine knows this. Like, our contract is with the Marines on the ground. Like, everything you do is to support those Marines on the ground.
Dude, I love that.
And so as an assault support guy, especially, like, our whole mission is to support everything they're doing and to help them in whatever way you have to help them, right? They need you to get them here, then damn it, you better get them there. Like, this time, this place, this is the LZ, and, resupplies, whatever. But everything we did was so focused on supporting those Marines on the ground. And that's really where it started. It started in those formative years at OCS in the basic school.
I love that. So you you do mention, later on that you're a button masher. Can you describe what a button masher is?
Yes. So in an aircraft, there's a trim system. And on both controls, cyclic and collective, there's a trim button. So you can set the controls, altitude, airspeed, and you could technically let go. And the aircraft will hold that attitude. And then to move it, you push the button in, you move it, you let it go. I personally just liked to fly the aircraft. So I almost constantly just held the buttons down. So I refer to that as a button masher.
Okay.
So I rarely use the trim or the automatic flight control system. I preferred to just literally be flying the aircraft.
Okay. And can you kind of have like 300 million questions because I've never flown anything before. And so can you feel like the aircraft as it starts? I know we're jumping ahead, right? But like, can you feel like when you're putting throttle, when you're putting power, can you tell in your mind if you're going to go, I'm doing, 60%, power. Can you almost mentally gauge that as you're kind of going through?
So I'd say in your early days as an aviator, you're completely dependent on what you can see. So you're completely dependent on what you see outside and what the gauges are telling you. And then my observation was somewhere around 700 hours, you start to develop what people refer to as seat of the pants. Like you can literally feel the aircraft and you start making inputs based on what you feel, hear. Your other senses come into play and you kind of become one with the machine. And when that happens, you can get to a whole different level of just being good, especially being a good stick, because you're anticipating things and you're not just reacting to a gauge. So I can hear that the engine is making a certain sound, which tells me I need to put a sweep more power in to maintain this altitude. It's these little nuanced things, but you'll see that light bulb come on for aviators right around 700 hours.
So one of the cool things for any of those that are listening on podcast, what Isaac's doing right now is he is talking with both hands in the actual position for where, now what are the two controls called?
Yeah, so it's the cyclic is here that you control in your attitude with, and collective is basically power. Power, take power out. But all this is really doing is moving the blades. So the blades are spinning at a constant speed in a helicopter. So as you add power, all you're really doing is taking a bigger bite of air, which creates more lift.
Okay. All right. We're going to get more into that later on because I'm going to nerd out on that. I am a total nerd myself. I saw button masher and I was like, that's a cool term. I need to know what that is. So you have now finished TBS. You've been working with this captain who has almost convinced you to be one of the good guys and go to the ground side. Almost, but you stayed dark side. So you met your girlfriend, Carrie, at the time. Can you go through that? Because she's an integral part of this story.
Yeah, she's a big part of the story for sure. Still is. So we had this odd family connection where her older sister was getting her doctorate at Texas Tech when I was an undergrad. My now brother-in-law went to work as a teacher at the high school where my dad was a principal.
Okay.
My parents are a little younger, so they became friends. And they're from Northern Virginia. So fast forward a few years, and when I was going to officer candidate school, they both were like, hey, on the weekends, like, you can go over to our parents' house and like do your laundry and call home or whatever, right? Because we get like a day of libo every now and then. And so that started out with me going to my now mother-in-law's house for like Saturday night dinner and do my laundry and call home. And she would always say like, oh, I've got a daughter that's your age. You should call her. And at first I felt really awkward about that. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But then, of course, fast forward a little bit, start the basic school. I totally screwed up one night and told my buddies, like, I kind of know this girl that I'd never met, actually, but I had a phone number. And, of course, right away, they're like, oh, my God, you have to call her. Girls our age, because none of us knew anybody there.
Right.
They ended up talking me into calling her. We went out with her and her friends. The first time we did that was a total disaster. So I had to go back and smooth that over a little bit. And thankfully, she was okay with it. And then from that point, we would just get together and spend time together on the weekends. But at that point, I had no idea where that was going. Like I knew I'm going to flight school. I have no idea what's happening after that. So the fact that she continued along that adventure with me from that point was unexpected, but
I love
worked out great.
I love that you continually come back to Carrie through this book as I like a bedrock is the way that I looked at it. It was like the foundation of the rest of your life is everything always started and ended with coming home to her and your family. And that was really, really impactful because you had found your soulmate very, very early on. And it's hard. I can see in some of your writing, is there is this very fluid nature of the service. It's very nebulous. You don't know where in your first 6 months in the service, you don't know if you're going to actually become a pilot. If you become a pilot, you don't know what platform you're going to fly. And then once you get your platform and graduate through that, you don't know where you're going to get stationed. And that's very hard for a very young relationship to say, I have no idea what the next 16, 18 months look like or where I'm going to end up for the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt it was important to have that personal part of the story throughout the book as well, because it certainly wasn't easy and at times was extremely difficult for one or both of us, usually both of us at the same time. But I felt like that was also just one added element of it's real. If you're going to serve in the military, like you have to try to figure out how to balance those things. And it's a really hard thing to do.
Okay, so then you graduate TBS, you have gotten your flight contract. Where do you go next?
So then everyone goes down to Pensacola to start flight school, and they put you through this. It's actually the greatest deal in the history of the military. For several weeks, you're in what's called the pool.
Yeah,
and
I was really jealous reading about that.
You just show up and muster once a week, and then they'd tell you to go back to the beach, and your only real job is to stay in shape and to start to get ahead studying for flight school until they're ready to class you up. And so then you class up, you go through this little 6-week program called Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination, which is it's a weed out program of it's all academics and swimming. So they try to drown you in the morning and then put you in the classroom in the afternoon or vice versa. And then when that's over, you go start primary flight training in a little, at the time, T-34 single engine fixed wing aircraft.
Was this the same aircraft that you saw in Lubbock, Texas?
No, different. So this is Navy and Marine Corps flight school, totally different aircraft. Okay. So just a little turboprop plane. But they had it, primary was in both Pensacola and Corpus Christi, Texas. So I actually asked to go to Corpus because I was originally from Texas, and I was like, it might be the only time I ever get stationed in Texas while I'm in the Marine Corps, which turned out to be true. So I went to Corpus for primary flight training, and it's 6 months of just learning basic pilot things, and all of us Navy and Marine Corps are in that program first.
Okay. How many students normally?
So I don't remember how many were in our class. So the classes were odd. Like you would graduate in a class of like 10 to 12 people. Okay. But you didn't go all the way through together. It was just like whoever finished that week, that was a class, and then they select, and then they go on to the next thing. But it was about roughly 2/3 Navy students, 1/3 Marine Corps, and then the instructor cadre is the same.
Okay, so tell me more about flight school, because I'm so interested in flying a plane. Seems like such a foreign concept to me. It's just not something I have any real grasp over. And then now that there's a formalized structure to it, that the military absolutely has rigidity and they have a step-by-step process. You said 6 months in Corpus Christi?
Yeah, it was roughly 6 months, I think, to go through the entire program, start to finish. And so you start with just very basic, day flying, learn instruments, acrobatics.
Had you flown at all at this point?
I'd flown a Cessna like a handful of times before I went to OCS, and I just did that on my own just to make sure I didn't hate it. Sure. But I had no idea what I was doing. It's like at the Lubbock County Airport with some random instructor. It was probably one of the most dangerous things I've ever done. But, it was some kind of information. But flight school was just very well designed and structured. I'm still shocked by this. I think you do your first solo flight on your 13th flight. So after a dozen times of going out with an instructor and proving you're not an idiot, then they're like, okay, here's the keys. And you take out and go fly out over the beach there in Corpus Christi and up and down the beach and come back. And they just want to make sure you can get out there and back on your own, which is pretty neat.
So, okay. So there's a little bit of, when I went to free fall school, there is a little bit of crossover. So we had to jump out of airplanes. I was shocked to find out that our very first jump was on our own. There was nobody strapped to you. You had done some pre-flight stuff, but they open up the ramp and they're like, there you go. I mean, you have an instructor flying with you right as you're going through it. But there's kind of this kind of a joke through the skydiving community is that your very first flight, the only thing that you see when you're in free fall is you're just watching your altimeter. And so the entire time that you're flying down, you have no recollection of anything else, just waiting. You're flying like this, just, waiting to pull your parachute. And then as you become more experienced doing that, then you're I get to look at the horizon for a second, and then you get more and more time to see the world around you. Was that like that with flying an
A
airplane?
little bit. I would say I noticed right away I was strangely comfortable in an aircraft. Probably to a point that wasn't good. And then that never really stopped, but I was very comfortable. I still remember on that first solo flight I did, it just so happened my roommate did his on the same day at the same time. And we were sort of half-assed, like chasing each other around out over the beach and, talking smack to each other on the radio.
No way.
Yeah, just idiot lieutenants.
Yeah.
But, we didn't do anything particularly dangerous, but I was always comfortable. I got comfortable pretty quick.
And so what was the comfortability? What was the genesis of that? Was it because of the instruction? Was it a little bit of like, not bravado, but like confidence? Or was it like, no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I think it was three things really that worked together to get me there. One was I was always a huge nerd, so I was a really good student. So I was always very prepared when it came to the knowledge piece of it. So I was confident that I knew everything that I was supposed to know.
Okay, you weren't like flying by the seat of your pants at that.
And I could see other students around me that didn't know their stuff quite as well, if that had been me, I'd have been uncomfortable.
Okay.
So I basically prepared to a degree where I was almost over prepared from an academic standpoint. So that helped. The instructors were good. It's a very straightforward program. Like the way they teach it is genius. Like, so it's like, take a bite of this and then this and then this. And you just kind of, it's building blocks. Mm-hmm. So it builds on itself very quickly. And the last thing is I just realized fairly quickly, for whatever reason, I was naturally a pretty decent stick, like literally flying the aircraft. And I credit that to probably, 8 million hours of batting practice growing up or something.
Yeah.
But it was similar skills, eye-hand coordination was just kind of there. So those three things came together and I realized pretty quickly, like, okay, I think this is a good fit for me. Like this feels comfortable.
Yeah, I sometimes think it's like it's hard to teach feel.
Yeah.
You do mention later on something that I say a lot is like the art and science. It's the combination of both,
Absolutely.
right? Is you have to learn the science behind it. You have to have the foundational backing. But there is a little bit of like art and feel and kind of like woo-woo to some of it because you almost have, it is a mechanical beast. There are physics that are constants in it and you're just trying to control the physics, with a little bit of nuance is what it seems like.
Absolutely. And so I really took to that. And then in primary flight training, just by virtue of luck, I ended up with a mentor who was a Marine Corps major who I still don't know why he was an instructor there. Like he was way too qualified to be a flight school instructor, but he was a Cobra pilot and had done an exchange tour with the Task Force 160 at the Night Stalkers, which at that point in time, I had a rudimentary understanding of who they were and what that meant, but we all just knew that meant that he was a total badass.
Yeah.
Right? And he had also, flown in Desert Storm. There's all these crazy stories about him. I don't know if any of them were true, but based on knowing him,
never let the truth get in the way of a good story, right?
And he was just, 6'3", bald, jacked, square jaw, he looked like an action figure. And I wanted to be that guy. So he was a great mentor to me throughout flight school and ultimately was a big reason that I ended up going helicopters and not fixed wing. So you get to the end of that first phase of flight school and based on your class ranking, you say, I want to go jets or helicopters or what they call heavies, which is C-130s in the Marine Corps. I had the grades to be a jet pilot had I chosen to pursue that. But after flying with him and then going back to that background that I'd established at, OCS in the basic school, I just decided I probably want to be a helicopter guy. Like, I think that's where I need to be. I need to be down closer to the ground with the grunts and doing the things. And so I went to him one day and just said, hey, sir, I'm really struggling with this decision. I thought I wanted to be a jet pilot, but now that I've met you and done all these, been here for a little while, I'm thinking helicopters is the way to go. And I'll never forget what he said. He just looked me right in the eye and was like, Lee, here's the deal. He goes, in a jet, Mach 2 is just a number on a dial at 20,000 feet. He's like, but a helicopter, 100 feet off the ground, 120 knots, looking into the eyes of the man who's trying to kill you, that'll make your balls crawl up in your stomach. And I was like, okay, done. Helicopters.
Sold.
Yeah, sold.
Sold. I remember that line in the book. I love that because that is, no shade on any fixed wing pilot out there. Yeah. We just don't have a relationship as a ground guy. Yeah. We don't have a relationship with a fixed wing pilot. They are very, I would say, our relationship is very transitory. We call for a bomb.
Yep.
They swoop in, two little things come out of the sky, a big explosion happens, and then they're gone. And we never see them again. I don't have put a face to a name. like when I'm a ground guy and I get in the back of a 53, I come up to the jump seat and I see the two pilots there, and I see the crew chiefs and I fist bump them, and we gain this like we're all I would say vulnerable together,
Yeah.
because you have to get me there, you have to get out of there, and then you cover my ass while I'm unfucking myself when I first get on the ground. I absolutely love that, and I love the idea that this major, I know that you mentioned Top Gun was an influence, right? As it was for a lot of, young adults joining the military. To be able to have these kind of conversations with these people that kind of broaden your horizon and then also show you there are different aspects, to it. So what was that? I remember you were on a flight. Is that, correct? Going back and forth?
Yeah, we did a cross country with him. We flew out to Yuma, Arizona, actually. He flew me around the ranges that MOTS 1 uses to this day, the Marine Aviation Weapons and Tactics School. And it was eye-opening for me that there was this whole other piece of the Marine Corps that I didn't really realize existed until I met him and some of the other instructors in flight school, and it kind of broadened your horizons, because to that point, like everyone else, thinking you go to flight school and you're like, oh, I want to fly F-18s and drop bombs. Like, that's cool. I want to be like Pete Mitchell. But then you realize like, oh, there's a whole other aspect to this aviation community. And I was very fortunate that I'm for myself, that was the right choice to go helicopters. I certainly have a bunch of friends who are jet pilots and loved it and did great things, and hats off to them. I mean, it's a totally different world that they live in almost. But I really am happy that it worked out the way that it worked out.
That's what it does feel like. It's a different world, I completely understand that, and I've talked with a couple of fixed wing fast mover guys, and their experience is a super difficult, super tough, and fascinating experience. But it is a world I know nothing about.
It is. It is. I learned more about it later. On the first portion of your career, you just focus on what you're doing. Later, I ended up working more closely with the fixed wing guys, and then I got to learn more about what they do, and then it all made sense. Like, you see how all the pieces fit together, in the air wing, and then how the whole air wing attaches to the ground, and all of that was great. But in those early days, it was just like, there was no war. I was just looking to have an adventure.
Right. So it's 97, 98
now. Helicopters just sounded like more of an adventure. So off I went. And so when I finished that primary flight training, they sent me to helicopter specific training for a few months back in Pensacola. Do that, and then when you graduate from there, you get your wings, and you're a winged aviator, and then you pick your platform.
Is there like a wing ceremony? Is there
they make a big deal out of it.
I know that you mentioned your first salute was the gentleman.
Yeah, my uncle was there for that. But winging, it's a big ceremony, and that you literally go up on stage and they pin your wings on and all those things. But similar selection process for the different platforms at that point. So the way it worked back then, there were, 53 CH-46s, Cobras, and Hueys, 4 platforms, and you could pick them based on coast. And then you also had the CH-53 Deltas in Hawaii. So there are like 9 choices, and then everyone who's graduating together just ranks their choices 1 through 9 and goes into a hopper, and then you get what you get.
Do they like tier it like they do at TBS, like high third?
No,
third,
it's just straight top to bottom.
Oh.
So at the time...
And so you were high up there. So you had your relative pick of the litter going into fixed versus rotor.
I did. So I got the rotary wing slot I wanted. There was a whole little side quest there where a couple other majors tried to talk me out of that and tried to talk me back into going to jets. and I said, no, thank you. And stuck with the rotary wing. But then for selection for helicopters at the end, all I really wanted was to come to the West Coast. Yeah. And I didn't. That was really based on nothing other than an idea.
Other than Top Gun was filmed out here.
I'd been out here once, like on vacation when I was like 16, and I'd seen LA and I'd seen San Diego, and I'm like, that's where I want to be. And so I got 53's West Coast coming out of flight school, so I was pretty excited about that.
So how long was your 53 training itself?
So at that point, I had to go to New River, North Carolina, was where the fleet replacement squadron for 53s was. So another 6 months in that program, just learning the 53.
And then and Carrie was living with you.
Yeah, at that point we were married. We got married when I was in flight school at Corpus. So she was along for the ride already, moving every 6 months and probably asking herself, like, what the hell am I doing?
Yep.
Following the city.
So then you were at New River?
Yeah. Okay. So we went to Marine Corps Station New River, go through the 53 program. Basically, they're just teaching you the basics. Got done with that, and then finally got out to my first squadron at Miramar there in the December of 2000. So I'd been basically in the training pipeline for 3.5 years from the time I went to OCS till I finally got to my first fleet unit.
How long is a pilot contract?
At the time, I believe it was 6 years.
Okay. I didn't know that.
And honestly, I wasn't even really thinking about that. It was just like this big adventure that I had decided to go on, and I figured, I'll figure it out later. Like, I mean, when I went to OCS, I really didn't even understand how anything worked. I just thought like, oh, I guess you live in the barracks and you eat at the chow hall. Like, I knew nothing. Like, I just kind of went into it with this great attitude of like, I'm just going to soak this up and this is going to be fun. And, my timing ended up either being perfect or terrible, I guess, depending on your perspective, because I got to the fleet in December of 2000 as a newly winged aviator, and bunch of motivation and zero clue about what was coming next.
And so your first instance in the fleet was checking into eventually what became the title of your book.
Yeah, Hangar 4. Yeah.
Tell me about that, because that's really cool.
All of the 53 squadrons at Miramar to this day occupy Hangar 4, which is like in the very middle of the Miramar flight line. The hangars are literally numbered like 0 through, I think they're up to about 9 or 10 now. But it's right there in the middle flight line by the tower. I knew that's where I was supposed to go. There's 3 squadrons in there. And at the time, I was checking into HMH 465. And the 4th 53 Squadron was in the hangar next door, Hangar 5. Years later, they made Hangar 4 bigger so it could be part of the same hangar. But so all the West Coast 53s are there in this one hangar, per se. And I walked in the door to check into HMH 465. I had no clue what I was getting into. All you've heard is rumors or whatever your other idiot buddies from flight school have told you. 465 at the time did not have a great reputation, supposedly. But, I didn't care. It was like, I'm in the fleet. This is going to be awesome.
Right. You're starting this new adventure. So you check in to 465.
Yep.
And you walk up and you meet a WTI.
Yeah. One of the first people I met. So I walk in the squadron. I'm up in S1 and my alpha is checking in. And Jay Spooner Holterman walks into the room, and you can tell right away, like, this guy knows what's going on.
He has like this air.
Yeah. He had that air about him. And I was just listening to what he was saying to the Marines, and then I realized he was checking back in from graduating from the Weapons and Tactics Instructor's course as a student. And that already at that point in my career was a goal of mine. Like, having flown with that major in flight school who came from that world, like, I knew, like, that's the pinnacle qualification as an aviator. That's the thing. And I didn't really even still understand exactly what it was. I just knew it was it's essentially the Top Gun of the Marine Corps. Right. Going to this school.
What's the percentage of people that get to go to WTI?
It's very small. So I would say 10%-ish. So it's usually about one aviator per peer group in each squadron will go.
So it's a lot like, to me, again, a total layman's term, I'm going back to Top Gun, where it's like, Cougar lost his wings, and now it's like, it's like this thing where a very, very small group of people gets the chance to go to WTI.
Absolutely.
And so now you're standing in the presence of a god,
and I'm at 0. And this guy just graduated, but he was great. I talked to him and told him congratulations on WTI and made a comment to him about how that was a goal of mine. And he was super cool about it, but he just kind of looked at me like, okay, well, yeah, we'll see, man. Like,
calm down, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
I love that line.
Yeah, take it easy. But I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew that was what I wanted to do from the very beginning.
That's fair.
So it was cool to meet him. And he ended up doing some amazing things as a WTI himself, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so now you're at 465 and you're getting ready to start your first deployment, right?
Yeah, so go on our first deployment that summer. Summer of 2001. So I've been in fleet for 6 months. We go to Okinawa, Japan, unit deployment program. And back then, we were still in the normal peacetime rotation. So we would chop a MEU. So Spooner and some other guys went on the 15th MEU off the West Coast here. The other 3/4 of the squadron goes to Okinawa. Then when you get there, 25% breaks off, becomes part of the 31st MEU.
Okay.
That we always called the 30 worst.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other half of the squadron, the 0.5, would just basically bounce around the Pacific, do exercises and do other things in theater. So
you wouldn't normally
like
deploy. You wouldn't deploy as a squadron?
No. So a 53 squadron was built to be broken into those 3 pieces to support the MEUs.
Okay.
And so it's Cobra skid squadrons are similar.
Okay.
For that reason. So they're built to break these debts off to go on the MEUs, and then the main body, the other half of the squadron, stays together for the other part of the deployment.
If I may, I don't know what the classification level is. Like, how many 53s are in a squadron?
So at the time, we had about 16 aircraft in the squadron. So you usually send a dead of 4 aircraft and, 10 pilots on each of those MU detachments, and then everyone else would stay main body. So then you'd have 20-ish pilots, 8 aircraft on the main body during the deployment. And then after deployment, everyone comes back together, reconstitute at home, train as a full unit for 18 months, and then break apart and
So
go
that's
do
just
it
part
again.
of your cycle.
That was the cycle.
You train at home together, and then you kind of get farmed out as needs of the Marine Corps.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then when it changed was after 9/11, it changed for a while. So, we're on that first deployment. When 9/11 happened, I'll never forget that day. We were in the barracks where we lived there on Marine Corps Station Futema. We had this little room that was essentially this bar we'd made in this common area lounge we called the Echo Chamber.
Sensing a trend with pilots here.
Yeah, for 53 Echo. And we were just in there. There was a typhoon rolling into Okinawa, so we'd hangared the aircraft, bought all the beer we could find, and we were just riding out the storm in the barracks. We're in there just screwing around, doing what we always did. And then someone ran in and turned on the TV. And, in that moment, I think we all knew, like, oh, wow, everything just changed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything that I thought the Marine Corps was to that point was about to get very different. It was sobering.
Yeah, really. I could imagine. So I was 16 at the time when 9/11 happened, and I was in high school. What was that like when you were you're watching this happen?
Yeah.
And you're in Kansas,
yeah.
Like you're in the thing.
Yeah.
You were in the big green machine.
We just knew, and we didn't know where we were going. We didn't know what we were going to do, but I think we all immediately believed like we're going to war with somebody, and where that is, what that's going to look like, I have no idea. But it was like in that moment, you just knew like training just ended. Like this is about to become very real and very serious.
Did you have you were on a det at that point. Mm-hmm. Did you have like a squadron meeting? Did you have like a breakdown of an intel summary of what you knew?
It was just this major spool X for like a few weeks. It was ridiculous. Like the next day we're back in the squadron. No one really knows anything, but everyone's trying to get into the fight. So they're in Okinawa. They immediately spun up a special purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force to do what exactly? I still don't know. But they start spinning this thing up. And the plan was we were all going to relocate to Guam to then go where from there? I have no idea.
Right.
But it took a couple of weeks to get all that sorted out, and then we ended up flying from Okinawa to Guam via Iwo Jima, which is still probably one of the dumbest things I've ever done on a 53. Like, that's just too much time over open ocean with nowhere to go.
So you mentioned engines on that, and we'll also get to getting a basket, because I think that's a very cool aviator line that I would love to know more about. But how many engines are on a CH-53?
So 3 engines on a 53 Echo. So for the most part, you're probably okay if you lose 1, which is, as ridiculous as it sounds, somewhat common.
Okay.
Lose 2, it's a problem.
So what's that? So did you guys lose an engine, or did you?
One of our aircraft on that flight lost an engine.
Right.
Not my aircraft, but our operations officer lost an engine in his. So he was able to keep going. It happened about halfway between Okinawa and Iwo Jima. So it was like if I remember, like 4.5 hour leg over open ocean. There's nowhere to ditch.
So what happens? So when you guys go through, do you call them EPs? Emergency?
Yeah.
So OPSO or operations officer loses one of his 3 engines. The flight seems to change at that point.
Did.
So do you start running through, or is like the sense of reality that sets in? So you're halfway.
Yeah. So everyone has to start doing math, basically. So he runs through his emergency procedures, and it's basically shut that engine off. And he can still fly on 2, but he needs to fly a little slower, and there's just some other considerations that come into play. I also give the KC-130 guys a ton of credit. Like, those guys are the most amazing planners in all of Marine Corps aviation, probably, like when it comes to like fuel planning. So we were aerial refueling off of those guys, but they're really running the whole flight of everybody, because it's all based on getting fuel from them at certain points and certain amounts, et cetera. And they're typically the ones that figure all that out. Now, on our end, on the 53 side, our senior guys will essentially do the same planning, and then we cross-check with them. But it's really the Herc guys' show. But then they have to make some adjustments based on his airspeed's going to be a little slower, so they've got to rerun numbers and make sure everything still works. But essentially, the whole flight just slows down a little bit to accommodate for that aircraft at that point.
Do the Hercs, do they have enough loiter time, or do they have to then go, because they're, what the term that I've heard before is they're dragging you, right? So you're having to get gas mid-flight, which I want to know a lot about, because this is some of the science that shouldn't happen, right? I want to know more about this. So they're dragging you from Guam to,
from Okinawa to Iwo and then to Guam.
Okay. All right. So and how far are the legs? I mean,
It's about 4.5 hours each leg. So, well, 700 miles if I remember right. Just my quick swag.
Yeah.
But, it's all planned out in painstaking detail of where your rendezvous points are. You're going to start taking fuel here. You're going to take this many pounds of fuel. You should be off the hose here. Like all of that's planned out. And it's dicey for the Hercs too, because they're flying what is for them very slow with their flaps down to have enough lift. So they're like right on the edge of their stall speed the entire time you're doing this, which is not comfortable for them.
I can imagine.
But it's a fun evolution for us.
Fun being.
Yeah, you probably won't find many Herc guys that say they like refueling helicopters, but I mean they're good at it.
So can you take me through that process, whatever you can that's not classified?
Yeah, of course. It's just something you learn how to do. It's part of the syllabus for 53 pilots, but you have a refueling probe on the right side of the aircraft that goes straight out.
Does that extend or is that always?
It extends, yeah. So it extends further. It gets about twice as long. The tricky part about that is once it's extended, you can actually chop it off with your own rotor blades if you make the wrong input, which has happened. So like if you bring your nose up too quickly, your rotor blades come down, you can actually chop it off. So you have to be very, very delicate in your inputs once that probe is extended. And you generally don't, there's a little checklist you go through right before you try to get into the basket. But the Hercs basically they have wing pods that have hoses with these, it's literally a basket in it with a coupler in the middle of it. And so you just fly your probe into that coupler, and as soon as it hits, if it hits right, you'll feel it lock. Well, then fuel flow starts, and then you just have to stay in formation and not disconnect while you're getting that fuel. So you have to fly essentially a damn near perfect formation off of them the entire time you're taking fuel, so you don't inadvertently disconnect and then have to start over.
So your fueling pod, right? Sorry, not your pod. What's the
probe?
The probe. What side of the airplane is that on?
It's on the right side. So it's easier, 2 seats in a 53. So it's easier if you're in the right seat because you're looking down.
Straight down that line.
Right. And so what happens is guys get more senior and more qualifications. One of the qualifications is aero refueling instructor. You have to be able to not only do it from the left seat, but teach someone from the left seat who's sitting in the right seat. And the left seat's tougher because now the probe's over here.
Your perspective's off.
And so you get what's called a visual parallax. It's just harder to tell where it is specifically in relation left and right of the drogue that's out there hanging off the C-130.
Do you find fueling? So do the drogues, do they come off of both sides of the aircraft?
They do.
Of the 53? So is there a side?
Off both sides of the Herc.
I'm sorry, Herc, excuse me. Do pilots have preferences?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. So the left side of the Herc is easier because of the way the wake turbulence comes off the rotor blades of a Herc. It's rougher air on the right side of the Herc. So if you're on the right hose, the air is a little rougher than it is on the left.
Okay.
Just
and
because
also,
of the slipstream that comes around.
You probably have less room, as I'm thinking, because your probe is on the right side, so now you're coming closer to the tail.
Yeah, exactly. You are also now physically closer to the KC-130 because your probe is on the right. So you're a little closer when you're on the right side also. And in both cases, you're really damn close.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see if we can put some pictures up on this of what this looks like. There are, a lot of ground guys get a lot of credit for stuff in the internet sphere of things they do. I don't know that there's a more dangerous or more moment that I'm like, no, I don't want any part of that. I don't want to do anything with that when you guys do. I've had to be on a 53, as a matter of fact, when we were getting gas at night in the middle of nowhere, right? And part of our leg was we were loitering for a long time, and we're sitting there and we're like, these two pilots are flying up to another aircraft on nods or on NVGs, finding this. How big is this basket?
I don't know, 3 feet? I don't remember exactly.
So 3 feet.
It looks pretty small when you're sitting in the aircraft. It doesn't look huge.
10,000 feet or whatever it is, right? Over some dark ocean somewhere. I am absolutely blown away. I've never gotten a chance to watch it happen.
Yeah.
I've been on a plane or an aircraft when it did happen, but it's one of those, I think one of the most impressive feats that I've seen in the military. It's like of human kind of ingenuity coming together. So how did your getting a basket work? How'd that work?
I had a rough flight. On the whole way there, I couldn't, and I did on just the basic qualification flights for it. So I was qualified, but I was having hell getting in the basket. I was flying with who's now a good friend of mine, was a mentor to me. He was our maintenance officer at the time. He's a major. He was great. So he'd like let me get all pissed off and frustrated and be like, look, I got it. But I ended up learning a great lesson. So that whole flight there, he let me kind of keep screwing it up. And the lesson really was you can't have any emotion in the cockpit at all. Because as soon as you get frustrated, mad, whatever, you're going to lose your ability to execute well. It just happens. And so he kind of let me learn that lesson the hard way, which was good. And then on the way home, a few weeks later, right after we took off out of Guam heading back, he literally got out of the seat of his seat and was like, "Hey, you got it."
So he was in the left seat?
Yeah, he was in the left seat and then just got out and left me up there by myself. And then, and then our crew chief jumped in the seat so that someone would be sitting there, and,
Right.
and he was like, "I don't know how to do this,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
this is on you." And I was totally fine, and so got in the basket no problem the whole way home, and never had an issue getting in the basket ever again after that. But
I
it
love
was a
that.
great lesson.
Well, I
Yeah,
love that. Like, lets you fail. I think that's a big
absolutely.
challenge that we face as, not trying to get super societal, but like we don't let people fail. And again, fail in an environment of a failure doesn't mean, you're not chopping
Yeah,
off,
nothing catastrophic was going to happen.
catastrophic.
Yeah,
Exactly. That's huge. And then it lets you get back in the saddle,
yeah,
right? And like
absolutely.
get your chance, and then it like check that off. But he also, I like the fact that he like, because this is on your flight back from Guam where you
Hmm.
get the successful baskets. So you had to like live in it.
Yeah, and then I had that realization, which was the best lesson of the whole thing, was just knowing years later, I would say to people, if you get excited, you get dead. And that it went all the way back to that lesson that I learned on that flight was any emotion in the cockpit is dangerous. So you have to train yourself to be unemotional, like almost robotic. Like no matter what happens, the thing that's going to get you out of it is to stay calm and to keep thinking. And if you have any kind of emotion going, it's going to slow down your thought process. It's going to bog you down. If nothing, you're going to be slow. And so you have to just maintain this total state of calm all the time so that your brain can operate at the max speed possible, because that's what's going to get you through whatever's happening or is about to happen.
Wow. I really, I don't know if a lot of the audience can tell, but I think that me personally, when I get around pilots, I can
Mhm.
see that their brains run hot.
Yep.
They are in a constant, and this is my own perspective, a constant like analysis mode.
Hmm.
And I really, really enjoy how pilots are really, sometimes they're very stoic. I know that they have a party side
Of
and there's a
course.
fun side to that. But like when it's on the job, it's like math. It's binary at
It
some level,
is.
right? It's like you are very scientific, is how or calculated, I think is how I work with
Absolutely.
a lot of pilots.
Yeah, because you're constantly absorbing an obscene amount of information to begin with, right? Like you've got all these gauges, you're flying this thing, you're reading a map, you've got 4 to 6 to 8 radio frequencies in your ear, and your interflight talking. Like there's just a ton of stuff happening at any given moment. So to process all of that information to begin with is one thing, but then to actually do what you need to do with it in a timely manner is like this next huge step. But that requires like your brain really has to run at hyperspeed the whole time to be able to do that. And at the same time, maintain that state of calm so that your brain can keep running at hyperspeed and not get thrown off track.
How do you control? I think one of the things that I've seen a lot of, and I've been impressed by pilots, is their ability to handle a lot of stimulus
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously. So you mentioned two different types of communication.
Yeah.
So you have external communication with your other platforms, and then you have internal communication. Can you explain how
Yeah.
that works?
So internally, we just call the intercommunication system, lets you just talk to the other people in your aircraft. So you're able to do that without transmitting over the radios. But then we also had 2 radios that had the ability to scan 4 frequencies apiece. So in like a tactical scenario, there's a few frequencies we have to be on for the air piece of the mission, but we're also listening to a couple of the ground frequencies to make sure we understand what's happening on the ground in the objective area as we're approaching or as we're exiting. So you have to understand who all the players are so that every time someone's up on the radio saying something, you know who that is, what they're talking about, what it means, how it pertains to you. So there's a lot happening at once there. And it's odd to explain it this way, but there's a million things happening. And if someone didn't have the training and just listened to the radios alone, they'd be like, this sounds like total chaos.
Yeah.
But it actually makes sense. And once you understand it, then it's almost like this other language that you've learned to speak and understand that gives you the info you need to make decisions and do things.
As a team leader, I would often plug in to what the ICS, I think it was called. I don't know what that stands for.
Yeah, intercommunication system.
There you go.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. So I'd plug in because I'm trying to get situational awareness as we're going into somewhere. And I would have to listen to all of your stuff. And sometimes I would break in with, like, hey, we're all good back here, like, thanks very much, kind of thing.
Totally.
Like, and the way that it was a totally different language. Because the way that I communicated with the rest of my team in the back of a very noisy helicopter was I had a whiteboard. And so I had a small whiteboard that I keep in my leg pocket. And it was like a little travel whiteboard. And I would write things. And that's how we pass communication back to each other. But I remember listening to whatever it is that you guys were saying up front, trying to extrapolate what I could and then be able to put like 10 minutes,
it can be overwhelming. I used to literally tell, whoever was in charge of the ground element that we were carrying that was going to be on the communication system. I always told him, like, hey man, if you have questions, just ask me. Like, if you're trying to sort through this communication and you don't know what any of it means, and just tell me what you need to know and I'll make sure you get it. And so there were sometimes I would just relay, hey, that's this that means this for you.
You got to speak grunt for us.
Yeah, totally. And for the most part, all I wanted was a countdown and to know if there was anything unusual in the objective area that they weren't expecting.
Very simple for us, right? Am I going to the right LZ? Yeah. Is anyone trying to hurt me when I get there, right? And are we on time? Yeah, those are what I want to know.
Yeah.
The holidays hit my body hard this year. A lot of travel, good food, and late nights. Basically controlled chaos. And I've noticed that as I get older, that chaos sticks around longer. Stiff mornings, slower recovery, and just feeling a little bit more beat up than I used to. So January for me isn't about some dramatic reset. It's about getting back into rhythm, and honestly helping my body recover the right way. That's where Bubs Naturals comes in. Here's something most people don't realize. Your body starts producing less collagen as early as your mid-20s. Collagen is the connective tissue. It supports your joints, skin, hair, nails, and recovery. When it drops, you feel it. Bubs collagen peptides help restore collagen levels closer to what your body had when it was younger. Since I've been using it, my joints feel better, recovery's cleaner, and overall I just feel more put together. Not chasing youth, just functioning the way I'm supposed to. It's also stupid simple. 1 scoop in my morning coffee. No taste, no grit, no weird aftertaste. Just part of the routine. And what really matters to me is why the company exists. Bubs is built in honor of Glenn Doherty, a Navy SEAL who gave his life saving Americans in Benghazi. That commitment to service and self-improvement is baked into the brand. They donate 10% of all profits to charity, starting with the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. On top of that, no fillers, no sugar, third-party tested, NSF certified for sport, Whole30 approved. This company is doing it the right way. If you want to live better longer, Bubs is giving our listeners 20% off. Head to bubsnaturals.com and use code COMBAT at checkout. And after your order, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please tell them Combat Story sent you. It directly supports the show and helps us keep these conversations going. And now, back to our show.
So we get back to Okinawa, and it was time for us to wrap up the deployment. So 9/11 had happened. The war had started. We, at that point, weren't doing anything after this big spool up. But our MEU detachment, which was Spooner, Holter, Motor, WTI, and those guys out on the MEU, they were about to do the invasion of Afghanistan. Ooh. And so we heard about that, and we were like, oh, we were all jealous, right? Like, they're going to get to do the real thing. We're going to miss the war. You know, all the dumb things you say when you think about it in retrospect, like, oh, we're going to miss our shot. But so, yeah, November 25th, 2001, Spooner led it's the longest amphibious raid in Marine Corps history off of Navy shipping when they took Camp Brownout. So they were out there doing real stuff.
Yeah, right? With General Mattis at the was that the SP MAGTAB, I think it was?
I don't remember. There was an East Coast MEU and a West Coast MEU out there that all kind of glommed together. Spooner led the big flight that went into Rhino the first time. And then they were there, kind of setting things up and getting things going in Afghanistan. So that January 2002, we redeployed back to the States. missed our shot, we thought. And then Spooner and those guys came home a few months later, and they were like war heroes, right? Like,
so Spooner, already a WTI, already 6'3", right? Like, or Captain America, basically,
absolutely,
or Major America, maybe. Right? I don't know.
He was the guy for the 53 community. Sure. I think that year he was named Aviator of the Year in the Marine Corps, all kinds of stuff. So he really, and I credit him with this, and I'll tell him that to this day, like, he really set the pace for the rest of the WTIs that came after him, because just by virtue of place and timing, he was first. He was the first Captain WTI to go do real stuff that we knew, and he crushed it. I mean, the whole deck crushed it. Everyone who was involved was awesome, but he personally just kind of set that standard of, hey, if you're going to be a WTI in this community or Weapons and Tactics Instructor, this is the bar. And so the rest of us coming behind him were sort of chasing that.
Yeah.
I certainly felt like I was chasing it. And it seemed impossible. Like, it was like, that's a goal that I'll probably never get to, but let's give it a shot.
Yep.
Right? Like, the guy was just so together. And he and I are still good friends this day. Awesome human being. But we got back. We reset. Someone there, Carrie, got pregnant like almost immediately after I got home from deployment. Classic, right?
It's probably like a 96-hour window. That, of course.
Yeah, there's always a rash of children born about 9 months after every deployment ends, in every unit. But we were certainly on that list. But, we were just doing the reset. And I always thought of it as like, after every deployment, you have a change of command. So you get a new commanding officer, a couple of majors come and go, and then all your senior people in the squadron, both officer and enlisted who've been there for a few years, move on to get orders, and then you get a new group of brand new people, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like the seniors graduate, you get new freshmen, you start this process all over again, you spool up to get ready to deploy again. But we didn't really know what we were going to do next. And the Marine Corps immediately told us, hey, we're just going right back to doing a unit deployment program. Nothing's happening, blah, blah, blah. So we were sort of preparing for that. But then we started hearing rumors about going to Iraq and all of these things. So that summer of 2002, it got kind of crazy. So our daughter was born. She was premature. She was born at 6 months. So that was our introduction to parenthood. And we were down at, what was it called, Balboa Hospital here in San Diego. And then the neonatal intensive care with her for about 9 weeks, if I remember correctly. And at the same time, the squadron was going off because there was all these rumors. We're going to go to Iraq. We're going to do this. So the squadron is on full prep to go to war mode. So I was juggling those things. And then once we got into the fall, we brought our daughter home. And then at the end of that year, I was like, I finally got to take a little leave, and we went to go see my parents in Texas. And we were at their home there late December, right after Christmas. And I got recalled off of Christmas leave by our XO, Brad Brown, who was the guy I'd actually have been flying with on the previous deployment that taught me how to plug. But he called me and was like, hey, man, you got to get back here. Like, we're getting on the ship and we're going to Iraq. Like, this is happening.
Wow.
And so we drove back because we had driven out there to my parents' place. They were in El Paso at the time. Then we drove back to San Diego the next day. And 2 weeks later, I was on the ship pulling out of the port.
There's a line in the book that I would be remiss.
Yeah.
This is something I thought was very, very good. The authenticity of the experience.
Yeah.
It wasn't just tough guy nonsense, right?
Yeah.
And like I beat my chest and everything. This is you writing about January 17th, 2003.
Yeah.
And your wife, Carrie, drove you to the squadron to Hangar 4 to drop you off to go on deployment. And there's a line that you wrote in here that I think is, and I'd like to read it back to you.
Yeah.
It's tough, right? So saying goodbye to Carrie and Tristan at the squadron was hard. The reality of our situation weighed heavily on both of us. We didn't know if we'd ever see each other again. Would Carrie remarry? Did I want her to? Tristan was so young. She would have no memory of me if I didn't make it back. I would just be some guy in old photos Carrie would show to her. She might end up even calling some other guy dad. Moving on would be necessary for both of them. Acknowledging that reality contained the brutality of a shotgun blast. This is real. Yeah. This is raw. What was that conversation? What was that thought process?
It was just a heavy moment, and I never forgot it because it was as heavy as it was. Like, there was just this very discernible reality to the situation of like, oh, wow, we're really here. Like, and you had signed up for this, right? But you don't really think about it in those realistic terms until you're in them. And that was a heavy moment because those are the things I was thinking. I was like, man, I don't know if I'm ever going to see these people again.
I was in that same predicament. We were deploying to Iraq, and
Hmm.
Scud missiles, weapons of mass destruction,
Yeah.
gas, sarin, mustard. Those were all like, we thought we were just going to get roasted,
Yeah.
over there. But this was real. I
Yeah.
mean, this is tough stuff. That's a tough, the duality, I think,
Yeah.
of having this joy, or not joy, this mission that you're like, I'm
Mhm.
excited I get to do this thing. But man, there's a cold reality on this.
And the interesting part about that, for me at least, was that was like the very beginning of me kind of becoming this other person that I never thought I could become, that I needed to be as a Marine to execute well. But at the same time, then you would come home from these deployments, and I still describe it. It was like living on two different planets simultaneously. On this one planet, you are who you need to be as a Marine, and on this other planet, like that person almost can't even function, like in a way that makes sense, right? So having to juggle those things and then come home and try to pretend to be normal, for lack of a better way to put it, and go to the grocery store and have normal conversations with your wife or kid. It's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, you're probably like walking down the aisle of the, produce department at the grocery store,
Absolutely.
thinking about EPs, thinking about what's going to happen,
Yeah.
battle plans, how we're going to do this, how this is going to work, brownouts, right?
Yep.
Like all these things that are weighing in. It's almost like you don't get to be present, I think, at some moments.
Yes, there was several years there I 100% was not present at home. Like I was physically present and I wasn't like acting crazy, but I certainly wasn't like emotionally connected in like a normal way. It was almost felt like, and I talked about this in the book too, it got to where it felt like I wasn't coming home and living with my wife and daughter. I was coming home and just staying with this lady and her kid that I knew. And part of that, I think, is just your natural tendency to protect yourself. So you start creating some emotional space or distance or however you want to call it. But, and she's going through, or they're going through their own experience at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Because they're getting used to living without you there either. And so when you are there, it's almost intrusive.
Like messing things up, dude.
It's very difficult to come and go. Like it's almost better to just be gone and stay gone.
Yeah, you mentioned later on, like rearranging the fridge when you get home.
Yeah. Coming home from deployment was always like, it's like amazing for like 2 to 3 days. And then by day 4, it's like a battle. And not because anyone's intentionally being a jerk. It's just, it's an adjustment when you get used to, I'm on the other side of the planet fighting this war, and you've got things here at home. Now I'm back in your space, messing your things up.
Yeah.
But my head is still back there somewhere. Like it's tricky. It's a really difficult thing to try to balance. And I've really tried to be honest about that to the book as well. Like it's hard.
Okay, so you are now deploying. Are you floating over?
Yeah. So what they did is, so everything we've been doing before kind of went out the window. We put the whole entire squadron, 16 aircraft, all 300 some odd of us, on the USS Boxer and set sail for Iraq.
Is the Boxer a reef now? Did they?
Yeah, it's the one that caught on fire a couple of years ago.
It was like arson, right?
Yeah, sad. Yes, we got on the Boxer and we floated as a whole squadron, and then we also had an entire 46 squadron on that ship, which is crazy in retrospect. And then we had a few small boys with us. They called it the Magnificent Seven. The Navy had, there was 7 total ships, and then all the grunts were on. Everybody was on there. Like everybody from the West Coast who was going to this war was on those 7 ships steaming for Iraq.
I remember
in January of 2003. And then other units, to include another 53 squadron, broke down and won on C-17s for the Air Force and flew over and set up at Al Salim in Kuwait. So about half of us, I guess, that went from the West Coast went on those ships, and the other half all got flown over. But we staged obviously a huge footprint there in the Kuwaiti desert, waiting for that thing to pop off that arch.
You remember, like you mentioned a term in here that I learned that I was misusing or misspelling for most of my career. So I didn't know that FROG is an acronym, or is it an acronym? Or
no, it's a reference to how that aircraft. My understanding. Hopefully, my frog buddies will tell me.
Yeah, any 46 pilots out there, please
correct. It sits kind of squatty, and it almost looks a bit like a frog.
I always thought it just looked like Kermit the Frog.
It has to do with just how the aircraft sits. They always spelled it PHROG, and for that, I have no idea why that is. I probably
Okay.
should know that, but I don't.
If
Um,
anybody in the comments has a reason, an explanation, I realized I've been spelling it
yeah,
wrong for years, and so every frog pilot must be
yeah,
looking at me like this idiot, right?
yeah,
So it's PH.
yeah. So they all say frog, but
Okay.
it's PHROG.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
So
sure I know there's a real reason for that.
wow, I wonder if
And
there's like an acronym somewhere in
yeah,
there.
I'm probably failing as a naval aviator for not knowing what that is.
I also love that you just used the term naval
Yeah.
aviator. Very kind of you.
Yes.
Okay, so now you get to Camp TAA Coyote.
Yeah.
I was at Camp Coyote
Oh, nice.
as well. So tell me about your experience at Camp Coyote or
Yeah,
TAA.
so we're there, we're in the Persian Gulf. We start flying into Coyote, first just to offload the grunts, and then we start the planning. And it seemed like it was just plan and plan and plan. And that went on for a few days while all this was building up. And for the first mission I flew, we were actually planning with the West Coast MEU that was there. So it was like this. They basically took aircraft from the MEU, bolted us onto them. We had aircraft in our squadron supposed to do another mission. So basically, the way the plan all came down was like all of the senior, more experienced pilots in our squadron who were WTIs or night systems instructors, they were going to fly the initial insert of the war on the night that the war started. It was a night insert that was supposed to happen. I was part of, like, we called it the B team, the second wave that was going to go in the next morning into the port of Qasr and put some recon Marines and a few other people in that were then going to go link up with the first wave. So the night prior, we're sitting in Coyote when our more senior pilots were supposed to fly the insert, and we heard them take off, and then we heard them come back, and we never really know what happened. But what had happened was, and this became a recurring issue in Iraq specifically, was there's no horizon out there at night, and a little bit of dust in the air on night vision goggles. It's really easy to get disoriented. So on that first mission that was supposed to go, a CH-46 that had British commandos in the back inadvertently flew into the ground and lost everybody. So they scrapped that insert that night, and the Brits just drove across. And so I flew the next morning on the following insert we were originally supposed to do anyway. So that was on March 21st, 2003 was my first combat flight. And we were in this big element, and we were we had recon Marines in the back with, one of their little interim fast attack vehicles, a couple of dirt bikes. It was very high speed.
Yeah.
And we're putting them into the port of Qasr, and what was supposed to just look like to us like a parking lot between these couple of warehouses. But of course, nothing ever quite shakes out like it looks on imagery. So we're going to do this insert. It was just surreal. The first time flying across the border and looking down, and you're seeing armored vehicles burning and things like there's a war happening on the ground that you can literally see. And we went in there to line up to land on this zone. But what had happened was apparently it had somewhere in there was covered with a bunch of sand. So it's taken all the helicopters longer than normal to get on deck just because everyone's browning out. So you get kind of hung up in this, call it, line of aircraft that are going to come in and land.
Exposed.
Totally exposed.
Basically hovering.
Yeah, it's a situation you're supposed to never be in.
Sure.
A high, hot, heavy hover and a heavy because you've got all this stuff in the back to include these Marines you're transporting. And we lost an engine. But when it first happened,
why wouldn't you lose an engine?
And when it happened, I originally thought we got shot down because it was a compressor stall, and a compressor stall sounds a little bit like a machine gun. So it's kind of this, brr, brr sound. And I was like, oh my God, we just got shot down. For like 2 seconds, I was so pissed. I was like, I can't believe we just got shot down.
My first
flight. Like,
I'm never going to live this down.
This is insane. But it was flying with Browner, and right away he yells out, "We lost one!" So it kind of sent me back in, like, "Oh, it was an engine loss. It was a compressor stall. Okay, I understand what's happening."
So it shocked you back into the EPs, right?
Yeah. So he brought me right back into what was going on, and I was actually on the controls, and he's like pulling
left
engines
seat or
off.
right?
I was in the left seat. He's in the right, but I'm flying, and he starts working the speed control levers, and he was just yelling forward and down, which I knew. I mean, we needed to go forward, and we were obviously going down whether we wanted to or not, but we were over the water. And so my first concern was that we were going to land in the water, in the port. And I was like, this is going to be bad. Like, we go in the water, we're going to flip upside down. It's a whole thing. And then we got to get out of this aircraft. Hopefully these guys in the back can get out. And then as we got a little further, I thought, okay, we might clear the water. But just beyond the water, there was a cinder block wall that I could see. And then I was concerned, like, if we hit that wall, we're going to break this aircraft in half. Like none of us are going to walk away from that. So I was just trying to push far forward enough to clear that wall. But at the same time, I didn't really know if we would or could. So I was just trying to milk it for all it had left. We're falling out of the sky. I'm trying to get as much forward momentum as possible to get over this wall. And then around 200 feet, so much sand had kicked up that I couldn't see anything anymore. So I had to fly the rest of the approach blind.
So this is Brownout.
Yeah. So because the aircraft already landed, it kicked up so much dirt. It was a huge dust cloud in the air that we went into. So I literally was just flying this approach at that point blind. But I knew, okay, at around 10, 15 feet, if looking over my shoulder, I'll see the ground like at the last minute, and then I'll just pull however much power we have left and we'll see what happens.
So describe to me how you're sitting. So you're sitting in this thing. Do you have foot controls?
Yeah, so you've got your feet on the pedals.
Those are yours.
And then you've got the cyclic in your right hand, collective in your left, and then a normal landing in a 53, which is not normal because it's such an odd aircraft, especially in the dirt, you have to literally lean and look out over your shoulder. So if you're in the left seat, you're looking over your shoulder like this. If you're in the right seat, you're doing this. Because that's what you're going to see first in a dusty environment.
And you said at 10 feet, you can generally see the ground?
Yeah. So on a normal brownout approach, you're going to the dust cloud, and then you just hold your attitude, fly the glide slope, and know, like, okay, at about 10 feet, I'm going to see the ground. That's going to be my last piece of reference to make sure where we are, and then I'm going to set it down.
Do you change? So what's your descent rate look like?
It's pretty light at that point, couple hundred feet per minute, and you get used to it. So hey, I'm going to be 10 to 12 degrees nose up. I'm going to be descending at about 200 feet per minute. I'm watching my airspeed should be ticking down, and we have checkpoints 125 feet, 45 knots, 120.
And your crew chiefs calling stuff?
Yeah, and they're telling us what they see, and they actually have better visibility than we do.
Because they can hang out.
The crew coordination piece is huge on these landings, and the crew chiefs are the most integral part of it.
As a guy in the back, this is where we all shut up.
Yeah.
Right? We're just I got nothing to say.
Yeah. Yeah, so they're telling me what they're seeing, and because they can see before you can, and they're just looking straight down out of whichever side they're on, and they'll see the ground more like 25 or 30 feet. So they have a reference. They can tell you, hey, you're drifting left, you're drifting right, you look like you're a little fast, whatever. They'll give you some pointers. But in this case, none of it, we're a totally unfamiliar place. We're kind of falling out of the sky. So I just knew, I was looking over my left shoulder, okay, at around 10 feet, I'm going to see the ground, and then I'm going to pull, and we'll see what happens. So we get down there, and I'm trying to keep the aircraft as level as possible to make sure we hit, on all three pieces of gear we have. And that's what happened. 10 feet, saw it, pulled whatever we had left, and we hit really hard. My feet were on the brakes, but right away I could tell we weren't stopping.
So
on the pedals, so 53's landing gear has literal wheels on it. Mm-hmm. And those rear wheels have actual brakes, like disc brakes.
Okay.
And so on the pedals at the top have these, I don't even know, it's like an extra little lever you push that deploys that uses the brake and sets the brake on the
So you don't have forward drive.
Right.
Okay.
So when the aircraft is rolling across the ground, you can press those with your toes, and it'll apply the brakes and stop the aircraft. So he's yelling brakes, and I'm on the brakes, which I was, but we weren't stopping. But what was happening is the aircraft was kind of bouncing across the ground like this.
So your wheels had no purchase.
Right. They were just bounce up, bounce down. So we did about 3 or 4 of those, finally came to a stop.
And you're skipping at this point.
Yeah. Basically. The issue that we were worried about was because we were still moving across the ground, there's other aircraft in the zone already on the ground, and we can't see them. So our concern was we're going I'm going to hit this other aircraft that's parked over here somewhere that I can't see. So we finally came to a stop, thankfully. The dust kind of slowly cleared, and we actually were probably about 5 feet from mesh and rotor blades with the aircraft in front of us. And they were oriented the way they were supposed to be, and we were kind of like this. And we were very left wing down and had a light that basically was telling us something was wrong with one of our blades. Wasn't sure exactly why we were left wing down. We knew we had broken something pretty good, with just something to do with the landing gear or something. Weren't sure. God love those recon Marines in the back. They jumped off that aircraft into a gunfight like nothing had happened. They were oblivious. They drove right out of their dirt bikes and their IFAV, and they were like,
no kidding.
And then it was chaos in the zone, of course. And so me and Browner just kind of looked at each other and we're like, yeah, we're not staying here. Let's go.
Yeah.
Because with them
super exposed.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, what are we going to do? Sit here and shut this thing down here? Like, no way. So with the weight off the aircraft, we had enough power, and he was already firing up the engine that had failed, trying to get it back online, and we just took off and flew back to Kuwait like that.
So you had one engine going, or
Mhm.
failing. You had then a blade malfunction.
Yeah,
Is that the right
yeah, it
term?
was a blade problem. We weren't sure exactly what, but we knew something was wrong with one of the
So
blades.
I imagine these aircraft are just outfitted with like a bajillion sensors on
They
them.
are.
And so are all the sensors like are they like nuisances? Like, hey, my tummy doesn't
Yeah,
feel good right now. Or is it like, hey man, this thing's we're gonna lose one of these things.
yeah.
Like, how do you
It's
tell?
a great question. And you just have to understand the systems. So there's things that are a bigger deal than other things, things you can live with, things that you can milk for a little while.
Well, I feel
Um,
like an engine and a blade are
in,
pretty integral to the
in that
system.
case, by the book, we should not have taken off in that aircraft.
Sure.
By the book answer is absolutely not. Shut this thing down. But we just knew we couldn't do
Yeah.
that there, and we both felt comfortable. And our crew in the back agreed, like, yeah, let's get out of here, and then we'll go figure it out in Kuwait. So
And
we flew back to Kuwait.
yeah,
Figured it
worst
out.
case scenario, I can fly further
Of
south
course.
and deal with this not in a hot LZ.
Yeah. So we
Wow.
just flew back to Kuwait and got it safely on the deck, figured out what was wrong with it, and then literally put some duct tape on the blade um, to fly back to the ship.
Wait a second.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not gonna let you gloss
yeah,
over
literally.
that one. Is that what they call 100-mile-an-hour tape or
I
whatever?
don't know, but that's what we used it for that day. So what had happened was we hit the ground so hard that there's a like hydraulic strut on the main landing gear on that aft lift side. And we'd blown the top off of that strut because we'd hit so hard that just the hydraulic pressure just blew the strut up. The cap of that strut went through our sponson, kept going up, and took like a softball sized chunk out of one of our rotor blades. And that's why we had the blade indication, and that's why we were sitting left wing down. So we literally cargo strapped that left main mount to the frame of the aircraft to make sure it wouldn't fall off when we took off again. Duct taped the blade, and then turned back up, flew it back out to the ship.
And no, I mean, so okay, when you're flying back out to the
Yeah.
ship, do you have a higher priority because you're like limping
Yeah, of
in?
course. So we called the air boss who's running flight operations on the deck, and Browner told him, "Hey, look, I got an aircraft that's got some issues. I need to clear off not only spot 9, but give me a little extra space on the right side just in case. We're not sure what's going to happen when we set this thing down."
What was flight time back?
It wasn't far because all the ships were just like right off the coast, so it was maybe a half hour.
So they have time to kind of clear.
Yeah.
There. I'm
Yeah.
layman here. I'm imagining aircraft from World War II coming into,
Yeah.
aircraft
Right.
carriers with like half a wing and they're like slamming in,
Yeah.
right, trying to save themselves. So you are in this kind of like dire straits and it can potentially get much worse on your way back.
Theoretically, yeah, but we were comfortable with it, and the air boss was great. He was like, "Yeah, no problem, I got it," and we got in, and Browner landed it, and no big deal.
No
And
kidding.
then our airframes Marines spent the rest of the deployment putting that aircraft back together.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of cases of
Yeah, they were great. Yeah.
What is the I'm sorry for destroying your aircraft, to the Marines that have to fix this thing? Like, is there like a Hallmark card?
There's a little bit of a mea culpa, but at the same time, those Marines, they'll give you a hard time about it, but they live for that stuff. Like, they love it. They take so much pride in it. Our maintenance Marines that is the heartbeat of the squadron.
Mhm.
And they actually, like, if I always had a good relationship with them my entire career. Love those guys. But, you give them a challenge like that, like, hey, sorry, like this happened. We bent this plane. Can you guys put it back together? They want to show you they can put it back together.
Oh man,
They live for that stuff.
You had this way, and it really shows through of really, really, really placing the emphasis on the support Marines.
Of course.
The wrench turners, the AVIs, right? Like, or avionics.
Yeah, avionics Marines, yeah.
Right, like that. They're all integral to this thing. They're not important. They're integral.
Totally.
And the way that you just described this, I don't know. I would like a reverence for these young Marines.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really important. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and I always just felt like, and I got a lot of mentorship from two guys that I'm still very good friends with. So, Brad Brown, the guy I was flying with on that first trip down to Iwo Jima, he was a maintenance Marine at heart. He was our maintenance officer at the time. And then I also, early in my time at 465, made very good friends with a warrant officer we had named John Pfeiffer. And John had grown up as an avionics Marine and then became a homegrown crew chief. And to this day, I think he probably knows more about a 53 Echo in the Delta than anybody else on the planet.
Yeah.
He was just that guy. But having those guys, that relationship with them really hammered that home to me early. Like, hey, this is all about the maintenance department. Like, you can have the greatest operational plan in the world, but if you don't have an awesome maintenance department, that operations plan is pointless.
Yeah, you're wasting.
You can't execute it.
There's most brilliantly, Rommel-esque, plan,
nothing.
right? And you can't get off the ground.
Yeah. And so getting that foundation early for me was huge because even later, once I became a WTI and ultimately a more senior leader in the squadron, I still understood that and understood that we always have to prioritize that first.
Yeah.
Like if nothing else, we have to take care of those Marines downstairs. The maintenance team has to have everything they need to be successful. Then we can talk about all these other things and do these other things. But without that, can't do anything.
I think those Marines see that too. Like they can
Yeah,
tell the difference between lip service and
of course.
genuine, like honest, like care. I think that's very, very, very important. One of the things that resonated through the
Yeah.
entire book for me. There's a story in here that you mention. You didn't mention the gentleman's name,
Hmm.
but the commanding general of the First Marine Division had a moment with during a downed aircraft. Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit
Oh,
more?
yeah. Yeah. So it was actually one of my good friends, still one of my good friends. It was VIP movement. They went to move him around the battle space. And one of the aircraft went down. One of our aircraft went down. And at the time, that was one of our squadron WTIs. So we immediately heard, hey, they went down. We knew who it was. His call sign was Krusty. And everyone's like, oh my God, Krusty went down, like of all the people. And it was just this very sobering moment for all of us because obviously we've been flying around there for a couple weeks or so. I think at that point we'd seen the things. Everyone had been shot at a few times. We had lost some aircraft, but not from our unit. Like we'd seen other aircraft go down. We knew other air crews had been
I
lost.
know a Huey
Yeah.
had crashed early on in the
Hmm.
invasion timeframe.
Yeah, there were a couple of things that had happened that had been catastrophic, but that was the first time in our unit something had happened. And thankfully, the whole crew got out. The general came running over from the other aircraft and was like, "Follow me!" Like the legend that he still is.
Yeah, yeah.
And they all ran and got on the other craft and came home. But when they got back to where we were, at that point, we'd gone forward. We were operating out of this little dirt strip called Jalaba,
Uh-huh.
and that's where we were living. And so when that crew got back, just seeing them, and it was this emotional event for everyone's hugging it out, but it was just sobering. It was like, oh damn, if it happened to him, it could happen to any of us. He was
Right.
the most qualified company grade in the squadron at that point.
So, I mean, but maybe days earlier, you are inserting a recon team
Yeah.
into, this port, right?
Hmm.
And your rotors are 5 feet from another,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, beyond
Yeah.
catastrophic,
Yeah.
right? So you have this brush, right? And then now Krusty has this, I mean, I would say more than a brush
Yeah.
with death,
Absolutely.
right? Maybe an introduction,
Yeah.
Um, how does that shape your thought process when
It
you're going
just
out the next?
it just made it everything more real. And I don't think I really thought about it a lot. It was years later I kind of started to piece together sort of this journey that I went through as a person where I slowly turned into what I think of as a robot. And as those things were happening in the early phases, it was all just data that was coming in and I was processing it and trying to not have an emotional reaction to it, but just learning to understand like, hey, this is the game that you've chosen to be playing and you're in it.
These are the stakes.
So yeah, this is welcome to the game. Like this is how this works.
Okay.
So you don't have a whole lot of time to dwell on it. You're just aware of it. It just makes it more real. Yes, these are some of the things that can happen.
So after your first initial,
Hmm.
mission set, and then Krusty goes down, what are your flights looking
It
like?
wasn't a whole lot left after that. Like once Baghdad went, then it wrapped up fairly quickly.
Hmm.
It was just some cleaning up the battle space, retrograde to the ships, and get ready to set sail for home, right? And of course, we declared that we'd won the war, et cetera, et cetera. But at that point, I personally felt like I didn't believe it was over. And I had nothing to base that on other than just like this gut feeling. I remember flying across the border from Iraq to Kuwait the last time in that first deployment there and thinking like, we're coming back here. Like it just felt like this isn't done. Like I know people are saying this is wrapped up. This isn't wrapped up.
Yeah.
Like
What gave you
that
that
was
sense?
just, I don't, honestly, I'm not sure, but I just felt like it had gone too eerily smooth
Hmm.
for it to be that easy. And I was like, we just broke a bunch of stuff. Who knows what's going to
Yeah, we
happen?
came in here listening to
Yeah.
Metallica, kicked some shit over, right?
Yeah.
Waved a gun around, and we're like, we're out of here,
Yeah.
man.
I was like, there's going to be some kind of ripple that we're going to have to come back here and deal with, which is kind of my innate sense at, 29 years old. Like,
Yeah.
what did I know? But I just sort of felt like that was the case. And, so we get on the ship. We came home, and it was a quick reset for us because we got tapped to resume the unit deployment program. So that was just a few months later. So we basically came home for like 3 months, and then I left to go on another deployment.
So yeah, you had like this really cool homecoming, right?
Yeah.
Coming home from Iraq, months earlier, I came home in September timeframe. I know you said July, I think it was.
Yep.
How did you guys come back? This is very unique to the aviation.
Yeah, so it's a big fly off of the ships into Miramar, giant formation. Everybody's out there with their flags. It's pretty cool.
So you guys like land like pretty close to that.
Yeah, literally out right
back at Hangar 4.
Right in front of Hangar 4, land, get out. It's a whole thing. Yeah, it's awesome coming home from those deployments.
Okay, so you come back from this like the most American thing ever, right? Like landing these, a squadron at this point, right? Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you guys are flying off the ship, were there any birds that were like no-goes?
No. So
like somebody's like, I'm ready to go.
This is one of the greatest miracles of Marine Corps aviation. Like the only day of the year ever that every aircraft is up is when it's time to fly off the ship.
Yeah, highly suspect to their internet.
It all magically comes together when it absolutely has to. So very rarely do you end up leaving an aircraft on the ship. So we got them all off, came home, and then immediately reset for another deployment. So that was a very quick turn when we came home there. New commanding officer, same thing. Some people check out, some new people check in, but we only had like 3 months to train. And then we were supposed to go back to Okinawa like we had been doing before OIF started. But I just had this feeling like, I don't think this is done. And sure enough, that's what ended up happening. So we deployed to Okinawa in November. So we've been home at that point, 4 months. Got to Okinawa, and had only been there a couple of weeks when our commanding officer let us know, like, hey, we're taking these aircraft that are in Okinawa. We're going back to Iraq. So there had been a cadre of aircraft at Okinawa that the squadrons were using on deployment, and you would always just trade aircraft on both ends. So like if a unit was deploying from Miramar to Okinawa, you'd both units would send an advance party in both directions, and you wouldn't physically move the aircraft. You would just swap aircraft. But in this case, the Marine Corps knew we needed to set up the battle space, and so they needed extra heavy lifting country. So the decision was made to take the aircraft from Okinawa over to Iraq. And there was already going to be a whole other full squadron coming from Miramar to Iraq also. So
we're seeing like this big time build up.
Yes, this is about, we're going to build up this whole thing now. So we were part of that group. We broke those aircraft down. It took a couple of months to get it all sorted out, but it was, I think, February where we put them all on C5s or whatever Air Force and flew them into Iraq to get set up to start fighting for what at the time we called OIF 2.
There's a fantastic line in here. I've written it down because I laughed out loud when you talk about the OIF 1 versus OIF 2.
Yeah, the naming conventions.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Okay, so now you're going back to OIF 2, right? So what time frame was this?
Yeah, so that is now, was it February of 2004.
Okay.
So we'd just been there the year earlier, quick stop at home, back out. So early 2004, and we were one of the initial units to go into Al-Assad to set up, to start operating. And the Army had been there. So we were taking a handoff from the Army at the time. Set up squadron spaces, the cruddy little barracks on main side, which I'll never complain about, especially knowing where, guys like you were living at the time. So, there was a couple moments. It's still like, pretty good living. Yeah.
I remember reading this book, like, motherfucking pilot over here.
Totally. 100%. Yeah. But we just got set up and we're getting established. But thinking back on it in retrospect, all we were really doing on that deployment was setting up the battle space for everything else that was going to happen afterwards.
Yes.
Right? So we were setting up FOBs, we're moving Marines all over the place, moving spies around. There was almost nothing tactical happening that we were a part of on that deployment. Okay. It was all very administrative in nature.
This is, you said, February, April time frame?
Yeah, early 2004.
Yes.
We're just kind of getting set up. And then 3 months later, that's when it started to get busy. It was like, okay, we have the Marines where we need them. People are in place. Now let's start doing things. And that felt good because it was, for the first couple of months, it was, guys, what are we doing here? We're not doing anything. We're just moving stuff around the battle space, which is a dangerous game to get into mentally. I successfully avoided, but we started doing some stuff at the end of that deployment. But that was really just kind of a precursor to what was about to happen for the 53 community. That became evident when we then came back 1 year later.
OAF 7.4289.
It was 04 tax 06.
There you
So
go.
I'm just like, what does this mean? It's like,
Sounds way less cool, too.
yeah.
Okay.
And that was a very interesting deployment. So I came home from Iraq the second time, and it was a very full year. So I was getting ready to go to WTI as a student. So I was busy doing a lot of flying, a lot of studying. And that year, I also lost a very good friend of mine who was still over this. He was there deployed. And I'd been around a lot of that up to that point, but that was the first time it was someone that I considered like a really close friend. And that hit me pretty hard.
You were weeks out from WTI at this point.
Yeah, I was literally like, I want to say I was like 3 weeks away from going to the class as a student. We lost him in early August of 2004, and I was supposed to go to the class in September. So I had a couple weeks to like process that, and not really process it, but at least go through the motions of memorial service and funeral. And so losing him was hard. And for my whole peer group and for Carrie too, like we were good friends with him and his wife, and our children, our first kids were born around the same time. It made it very real for everybody. And I would say my close circle, not just at home, but a close group of friends that I had that had gone from OCS all the way through flight school to the fleet together. It hit all of us pretty hard. But I had to, get back into character. Like my squadron needed me to go to the school that had been this goal of mine forever, and I needed to go take care of business there and then go do another deployment.
The compartmentalization that you have to go through in that aspect, I think you wrote in there like death was kind of all around you all of a sudden, and it came up very quickly, and the reality of everything really sank in, and then losing, your friend, your family friend, and then having to go through all of this emotional stuff, burying a very good friend of yours, being there for the family. Your writing was tough when you're talking about having to change into civilian gear or civilian attire and go deal with this. Those aren't classes that we get. Yeah,
for sure. It was hard. And so, we lost him. And then on that same MU detachment, one of our 53s from our squadron that was part of that detachment went down, lost a couple of crew chiefs in that. So it was just like all of a sudden these things were happening that felt close to me. But I also kind of know, or I do know in retrospect, that was really the point where I went from being pretty armored up to completely armored up. Like that was the point where I crossed over into like full robot. Was right after that happened, because I just felt like there's no place for this. Like if you're going to go do what you need to do and take care of, not only yourself, but everyone else you're flying with, the Marines on the ground, like you need to like be in character like all the time.
Yep.
Like that's just what it's going to take. And I was able to mentally do that.
Was this a conversation that you had with Carrie at all?
No, it was not a conversation. It was something I can honestly say this now. I couldn't even articulate it myself until years later. Like it was happening and I was aware of it and I was kind of telling myself like, you need to do this. I didn't even know how to put it into words.
Right.
I was just doing it. And that's really where I turned into, like, I think of something I never would have thought I could become in a way that was good for my career, or, at least made me more effective in what I needed to do, on the aircraft and in the squadron. But as a human being, it then became something I had to go back and figure out later.
Yeah.
Like that comes with strings, that ability to do that. But that's where it happened and crossed over. And then, went to the WTI course. That went well. Came back to the squadron. We were getting ready to deploy.
Well, can you tell me a little bit more about WTI? Because
yeah, of course.
I have no concept of WTI, Weapons Tactics Instructor.
Yeah.
And the patch that you guys, that's the only thing that I see. Is I see a patch of like this badass eagle on it, right?
So Marine Aviation Weapons and Tactics Squadron 1, MOTS 1, is in Yuma, Arizona. And that building is essentially the hub of all Marine Corps aviation tactics. Like they own responsibility for training and readiness manuals, all tactical development, like everything that happens tactically in Marine Corps aviation is based out of that building. And then twice a year they put on a course, the Weapons and Tactics Instructors course. Students with every qual besides WTI come there to get this last qualification. So at the time I went, it was 6 weeks. It later became 7, but it's essentially 3 weeks of very intense academics, followed by 3 weeks of very intense flying.
And so is it broken by platform or is it?
It is. So you start out, and it goes in reverse order. So you start out doing academics that are generic, so apply to everybody there. Then you go to just rotary wing guys, then to just 53 guys. And then in flight phase, it goes the reverse order. So you'll do flights of just 53s for a few days. Now all the helicopter, all assault support is together doing some big missions. And then at the end, you're integrating everybody into this huge final culminating exercise that has fixed wing, rotary wing. We bring a infantry battalion out there to play. Every kind of adversary you could think of gets thrown into the mix. It's a huge course that gets put on.
When I ran the Recon Team Leaders course, we timed our trips out to Yuma to line up with WTI because with
all the assets. Yeah.
We just had, you got the aviation element gets what it wants a lot of times, thankfully, because people like you have worked at the Pentagon and can advocate for that, right? And so we were just like, we would ride the coach strings and then it was such great training for us as reconnaissance Marines to have actual pilots and not other recon Marines on the other side of the radio. So when we were trying to slew sensors on or we would be able to send our young reconnaissance, prospective team leaders to go work with aviators and screw up briefs and screw up planning while you guys are doing the same thing. And it was a really great place for air-ground integration. And again, having the infantry battalions there was always a huge aspect as well.
And for the most part, the students get their last couple qualifications there, not just the instructor stamp of graduating, but also for us, assault flight lead, meaning you can now lead a flight of an infinite number of assault support platforms, and then air mission commander, meaning you can be the person who's literally the commander of the entire aviation package associated with this mission, which is unique in aviation because you can get that qualification as a captain and then go back out in the real world. And the ground combat commander is typically going to be an 05 commander.
Yeah.
And you're sitting next to that guy in a Huey, and he's in charge of what's happening on the ground. You're in charge of what's happening in the air. And he obviously outranks you, but he's not your boss.
Yeah. Like we are two parts of a whole here, buddy. Right. You're like looking across and there's not a lot of, I can imagine.
And there's also an interesting dynamic in aviation because of qualifications. So you have rank, you have billets, like your actual ground job in squadron, then you have qualifications. So you can have, in my case, a captain with all these qualifications, and then a more senior officer in your flight who has less qualifications, and you're in charge of the flight.
Ooh.
Which can be awkward at times.
Right? So how does that work?
So if you are leading the flight and you have all those qualifications, like it's your plan, you own it, and we're doing what I say we're doing, and you're not going to get trumped by a senior officer that has less qualifications. It makes for some awkward moments at times, not only just in the squadron, sometimes in execution, but for the most part, everyone in aviation understands all that and is very good with it.
Okay, so it's kind of the rules of the road.
It is what it is, yeah.
And I'm sure that there's the service or the people inside of it would try to avoid forcing those situations from happening. Is it a requirement for a squadron commander to be a WTI?
Nope.
Okay.
In fact, most of them are not. I mean, in a lot of cases, they're not.
Okay. So because I remember reading about a squadron commander at one point that had to get like check rides, had to get some training on a new platform. That's something that's super different than the ground side.
Mm-hmm.
Is there's just this assumption of a trajectory that a commander has been on for a long time, so that they're the most experienced person in the room. Is the assumption,
of course,
in that space, but maybe not so much for the aviation.
Not necessarily, and especially once the war got going, because just like by virtue of timing, right? Like I went once and then twice, and then I'm going a third time. You have majors checking into the squadron that have gone 0 times, and
especially the time frame is you had 3 pumps in like a 3-year period, where someone's doing a B billet somewhere,
exactly,
and oh boy,
so my peer group, for better or for worse, just got all of that fire hose, but it also made it interesting at other times. Like when I went to WTI as a student, and I had a couple of guys in my class of students who kept bringing this up, we had more combat time than the instructors at the back. So even that creates like a little bit of tension at times.
Yeah.
And they were more experienced pilots and had been doing it longer and knew everything, but it just makes for there was an awkward period in the Marine Corps there where there was this little group of us that were at OF1, then cranked out a few deployments, and then all of a sudden we're these senior captains in
It's like haves and
aviation
have-nots
that,
almost.
yeah, all thought we were 10 feet tall and bulletproof because we'd done the thing,
Yeah.
like, and done it a few times.
Yep. Dude, I
Yeah.
completely understand that.
Yeah.
I had a sniper instructor that had not been to combat, and sniper school was a very different place, especially then. But
Yeah.
it was not an environment where I could say anything about
Right.
that. I would be handled a very certain way if I did. But it was like things that, when someone's pissed off about something or they
Yeah.
have, so, a bone to pick with something, they're like, look, this blah, 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 hasn't been to combat. You're like, it's just young, boyish
Absolutely.
stuff, right? That eventually I can look back and kind of grimace over and be like, oh God, right? Like this person has, like you said, a ton of real world experience, a ton of applicability in their trade craft. They just haven't gone to the show. And
Yeah.
it was by luck or by default or by chance, and that's the
Yeah,
aspect.
absolutely.
So now you graduate WTI.
Yep.
You write in the book again that you were addicted to combat flying. I like that.
I started thinking of it in those terms around that time. Like, I really liked it, and I knew I liked it. I also thought I was crazy because I liked it. Like, consciously, I would sit there oftentimes by myself thinking, like, you really shouldn't like this. Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, something's wrong with you because you like it. But I did. I loved it. Like, it was like a drug, and it was like the best drug I'd ever found of any kind. Like, it was just so exciting. I just wanted to be out there doing it all the time.
Did you find that hard to explain to people that weren't in the military?
I didn't even try to explain it to people at that point. Like, it was just all in my head. And then I went to Iraq that third time. So my fourth deployment, third in a row to Iraq. And now I have all the quals. I'm getting to do this thing that I've thought I've always wanted to do and be this weapons and tactics instructor. And just by virtue of timing, when we went back there in 2005, the insurgency had really popped off. And there was a bunch of stuff happening in country that we got involved in. And there were also, for other circumstances, like the 53s just got more tactically involved in a lot of the named operations and things that were going on. So on that deployment, my third one to Iraq, we ended up doing 68 named operations that we were part of, which at the time I remember thinking, like, that's a record no one's ever going to beat. Like, no other 53 squadron's ever going to do that many. But it seemed like about every 2-3 nights we were out there as part of something.
400 hours?
Yeah, we flew a lot, like a ton of hours.
So can you describe flight hours to us? Like, it's not something that we use as a measurement.
So normally at home, a squadron would fly a full squadron, 300 hours ish a month as a squadron, and that gets all divided amongst all the pilots and
that's physical time in the air.
Literal log time, wheels are off the ground flying. But over there on those deployments, we were logging almost twice that sometimes in a month, maybe 3 times on a crazy month. I mean, it was just like there was flights going nonstop.
What's the
pretty
maintenance
much
cycle
24
like?
hours a day. The maintenance cycle was just busy. I mean, they were busy. Those Marines were busy, but the squadron never sleeps. So, and once we get in country, we'd basically split into, in the simplest of terms, call it a day crew, night crew. And we got smarter at this over the years. In the early stages, we were not smart about it at all. It was just cowboys and Indians. And you might be on the night schedule one day and the day schedule next. It was bad. We later got much smarter about how to rotate between pilots and aircrew between those schedules, the maintenance Marines. And so you kind of concentrated more and more flying towards the hours of darkness just because it's safer in terms of the threat, but it's more dangerous in terms of it's just much more difficult flying on MBGs and any kind of dust in the air, et cetera. Your odds of what we call a controlled flight into terrain go up exponentially. Just things happen. Aircrew get disoriented, flying to the ground.
So what is flying a CH-53 at night in a desert? Have you flown like New Moon, like Zero Illume kind of thing?
Oh yeah. So we would fly whether we called it highlight, low light, and the measurement for all the nerds out there, is 0.0022 lux. So at a certain point, there's enough light from the moon that we call it highlight. You can actually see something.
Okay.
But when it's not highlight, you pretty much can't see anything. So you have these night vision goggles on, but there's no light for them to amplify.
Sure.
So they're not doing much for you.
Yeah.
And in those early stages of OAF, or at least for 1 and 2, we were flying such low level altitudes for the threat, for threat purposes, that you're literally about at any given time a couple of seconds away from making a catastrophic mistake. You're just flying that low to the ground.
And then your urban environments, so then there's like power lines and
Oh, yeah.
buildings,
All kinds
and they don't
of-
have the same marking that we have.
Yeah, there's a million things that can go wrong out there. And in Iraq, they had also painted all the power lines. The towers were painted the same color as the desert. So it's damn near impossible to see any of those things, especially at night. It's a tough environment. And then, every now and then we get I talked about it in the book. On my second deployment, we ran into one, but you'd get these haboobs, these giant Iraqi death storms that would kick up and look like the movie The Mummy. It's just like a wall of dirt. But you hit one of those at night and it was dicey because you couldn't see it coming. Like you had no way to see it. So you didn't
There's no
know
visual cue.
there's nothing to see. And so you would just slam into it and immediately know, like, oh damn, we just flew into one of those.
What are the winds like inside? Because it's
just insane. It's like being inside of a washing machine at first. Like the aircraft just gets tossed all around. Your gauges are bouncing. Like,
what are the EPs?
it's scary.
What do you do?
There's really not one, other than to manually make sure that our engine air particle separators are closed so we don't ingest too much sand.
I'm sorry, can you say that nerd term one more time, please?
There's these things on the front of the engine. It's called engine air particle separators. It's supposed to keep stuff from getting in the engines that'll grind down the blades inside the engines and wear them out.
You could just say air filter.
Yeah, it's basically what it is. It's a big air filter. Yeah. Make sure those are closed. But other than
Way to
that,
high road me on that one.
other than that, you're just fighting your way through it, and it's like riding a bucking bronco almost. The aircraft wants to do what it wants to do.
Are the winds spinning inside of these things?
It's not necessarily spinning, but you're getting a lot of updrafts and downdrafts.
Okay.
So what's happening is if you have one primary instrument we look at a lot when we're flying lower called the vertical speed indicator that tells you like how fast am I going up or down.
Okay.
And that thing would just literally just be bouncing. Like it would just be doing this. So you're like, I don't know, let's see what happens.
Holy cow.
And so I remember when we slammed into one at night, just telling my co-pilot, like, hey, keep me honest on the altitude, so I'll do everything else. And I was just like flying as well as I could fly. And he was telling me like, hey, you're descending, you're 150 feet, 125 feet. Okay, got it. Come back up a little bit.
But right there, you're in the show.
Yeah, you're just in it.
You were in the thing
Yeah,
that you
you're in
have
it.
trained your entire
Absolutely.
life, or at this point, your military life, to be. And like, there is something addictive
Yep.
about having to rely on every single one of your senses,
Yep.
to include what you say was your sixth sense. By the way, you gutted to Copenhagen tobacco.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
dude. Even I didn't do that. man.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but you have all, and I get it. Like throwing a lipper in, right, and like
Mhm.
focusing down and sensing everything. It's the only thing keeping you alive.
Yeah.
And that thrill, that like rush towards that.
And it's what I talked about earlier at the very beginning. We were talking about that seat of the pants thing. I mean, I firmly had that at that point. So you're just one with the machine. And I was very regimented in, I needed all my sensory boxes checked in a very certain way when I first strapped in. And then after that, I was like, okay, I'm one with the machine. Like I'm just a piece of this machine. And this machine's an extension of me. Now I need to go make this machine do exactly what I need it to do to take care of these guys in the back or whoever we're going to help that's out there on the ground
Dude, I
tonight.
love
Like that was it. Like that was the job. Like
Oh, I love that.
it was a little bit like, I shouldn't say Transformers, but there's some other movie I remember my son used to watch where like these guys are like inside these giant robots fighting each other. But it was being inside of that machine and it
Pacific
becomes
Rim?
something like that. It becomes like it really does become an extension of you. Like if you think of it that way, and it's just like, okay, I'm just a cog in this thing, and this is my piece of the job.
I love that. Actually, that brings me to a question. When it comes to autonomous flights, like how do you, as a human pilot,
Yeah.
right? When it comes to things like that, because I know that there's going to be, and when we look future, and we don't have to pontificate too much
course.
on this, but I'm always like, there is a feeling,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know this as a sniper who has whose job is no longer a job inside of the military
Right.
or in the Marines at least, who does not have a role for infantry snipers anymore, that they're being replaced by an autonomous, system, if
Yep.
you will. How do you feel about that, right? I mean, can that be done when you're flying into what's it called, a haboob?
Yeah. I
Like how does a
mean,
machine?
frankly, it's safer to not have those humans in there, right? Which is how we got here, I think. But I think just for me, it would be very difficult to be an autonomous pilot or a drone pilot of any kind. And, I have friends that do that and have done that. But it was very important to me to have that sensory input of literally being in the aircraft.
Yeah.
I don't know how those guys do it. It's got to be very difficult and strange to be sitting in a box wherever they are operating this thing because you're not getting all of those sensory inputs. Like you're literally only getting the information on the screen and what the gauges are telling you. So you're not getting that seat of the pants isn't a thing.
That's right. So there's no crew chief
Yeah,
yelling
it's
out
not
the
a thing.
side,
Yeah.
right? Being like, hey, you're shifting left here.
Exactly. And, I don't have Pfeiffer in the back telling me what I need to know or saying, hey, this is what it looks like back here. You ought to think about this or don't do like there's a whole crew thing that happened in a 53 also that was just awesome that I really loved being a part of.
Yeah.
So yeah, hats off to those guys who are flying drones. I don't know how they do it. It's got to be so bizarre.
I love that. And again, drones have saved my before. I'm not like an anti-drone guy.
Yeah.
There are moments where I think that there is can a human be replaced on this thing? And I'm like, I don't know with assault support, with as intricate as it sounds, that I don't know that could happen.
I mean, I obviously am biased, but I would have to think that assault support would be one of the last places you could remove the human element from flying the machine.
Wow.
It's just such a big piece of it.
Okay.
So we get there, it's our third deployment to Iraq. Then the insurgencies exploded. There's a ton of stuff going on. And it didn't take us too long to figure out because they were on our base. There's like this super secret compound like there at El Asad with obviously some special operators in it. We didn't know exactly who they were, but they had Task Force 160th, aircraft parked outside their compound on this little road that was there. And so we knew, okay, they've got organic, they call them DAP birds, the 60s that shoot direct action penetrator, I believe it stands for. They had little birds, but they didn't have any 47s. But every night we'd see them taking off in those 60s and little birds to go do whatever they were doing.
Just feet dangling out of the skies, right? Always super cool.
Total cowboys.
You'd see them flying over and you're like feet dangling out. You're like, those guys are badass. I remember.
And then we'd see them in the chow hall, at like mid-rats with their hockey helmets on with NVG masks and, like all this like very non-standard uniform items. And a couple weeks in, they came over to our squadron spaces just randomly one day. A couple of them walked in and it was me and my buddy Dave Payne, and it just happened to be there. We're both captains. And these guys start talking to us and they're like, hey, look, this is sort of who we are. We don't have a heavy lift asset here in country because they're busy, blah, blah, blah. You think you guys might be able to do some inserts with us and insert some vehicles and things. Of course, me and Dave were like, yeah, we can totally do that.
Did you try to play it cool? Or were you
we totally played it cool. But it was like, I'm sure we can do that. Like,
we'll see. We'll see if we've got time.
Bring the vehicles over here and let's take a look at them. And 10 minutes later, they pulled back up and this looked like a little array of Mad Max type vehicles that they had. And we started making sure they would fit on the aircraft. But then we still had to go send up a formal request to get waivers for these vehicles. But we put all of that in motion right away. We certainly wanted to help them and wanted to work with them. And we found out later that the only reason their 47s weren't there is because they were still busy in Afghanistan. So they just needed a heavy lift asset. And we were able to do that. So we started doing a few missions with them. And it was just, for us, it was super exciting to be able to work with guys like that. Because on occasion we get to do a recon insert or work with the Anglico guys on something. There was for some cool stuff. But those guys were on a totally different level.
Yeah.
And they were really just there as this specially formed task force just to hunt that one person. So they were totally just obsessed with, that's all they were doing. And so every time we did some work with them, that was the objective, was they were trying to catch that guy. And we got to fly a bunch of those missions with them doing that. And at the time, we didn't even really still totally understand exactly who they were. Like we knew what they were called.
It was like never formally introduced. Yeah.
No, I mean, because when they introduced themselves to us, it was just like two guys. And,
Yeah.
no one's wearing any name tapes or ranks. And it was like, I'm Brick and this is Todd. Like it was nothing, It was
Can we ride your helicopter?
I was
And you're like, let's do this.
Sure, dude. But they were awesome to work with. They were total pros. I mean, they were fun. So getting to work with those guys was really neat. And at that point, I've already graduated WTI. Have a very good understanding of what the Task Force 160th
you have hundreds,
is.
near maybe thousands of hours?
Yeah, I was pushing almost a couple thousand hours almost at that point already. Like I'd gained a ton of experience in a very short period of time.
So they happened to find the right to captains?
They did, yeah. We were the two senior captains of the squadron with the most quals. And then we had to run it up our chain of command, make sure our chain of command was okay with us working with them. And of course they were. And so then it just became part of our rotation. Like these task force missions would come up, and
were you always slated with the task force mission?
No, not necessarily. So we still had like a rotation going of like, call it a day crew, night crew, and we all still rotated through there. But there were basically a handful of us in the squadron. It was me and my buddy Dave and a couple of the field grade that were like had the qualifications to do what needed to be done to go fly with those guys.
So can you elaborate? Without stepping into the classification, Can you elaborate some of the stuff that you were doing with them?
Yeah. So the biggest thing we ended up doing is actually the intro into the book. It ended up being this thing called Operation Matador, where they were going to cordon off this whole city and go, catch this guy finally. And what they did is they put up a restricted, we were just like an ancillary player in this. It was really Task Force 160th, and then this ground task force, they just blocked off all the airspace around there, and we were just a supporting position. So we went and put Marines in a blocking position on the outskirts of that, just to make sure there were no squirters that got out of the city and tried to run across the Syrian border, which sounds like a very simple thing to do. But the planning and everything leading up to that was classic Marine Corps chaos. At one point, ballooned into a battalion insert, then back down to a section. It was so stupid.
I love in the beginning of the book, I felt this in my soul when I read this. The plan sounds simple, but like all things in our beloved Marine Corps, it has taken a full week of every field grade officer in the country trying to it up for us to reach a plan that almost makes sense. Field grade officers are the rank of major through colonel. Company grade officers are captains and below. A significant divide exists between the ranks of captain and major, and promotion from captain to major is often referred to as the lobotomy. As a result, all captains and lieutenants feel obligated to talk majors.
Absolutely.
Dude, I fell apart laughing when I read that. We used to say, because ours was like staff sergeant to gunny, and we used to say that we like go get your brain sucked out, right?
Yeah.
We always joked that it was dental. Like somehow you would go get a dental exam and they'd knock you out and then change your brain and make you like this company man or whatever it was.
Yeah. And obviously over the course of my career, I knew and got to work with and for a lot of great majors. Sure. My punishment for my distaste for majors as a captain was I had that rank longer than any other rank I ever held. So the Marine Corps got me back on that one. But yeah, as a captain, we were all, every time the majors were saying anything, we were like, whatever.
Oh God, they're solving the world's problems over there.
Yeah, for sure. It was really easy to just totally talk smack about them and blow them off. But they're obviously a big part of the machine. And a very necessary one, for sure.
Totally.
That's a tough rank because you basically, that's when you cross over. Like, you don't get to be part of the cool kids anymore, Like you really don't.
You have
it's a tough place to be.
On. Yeah. I totally understand that, and I completely empathize with that.
Tough place to be.
And it was so cool being able to kind of understand how this operation changed from size and scale.
Yeah.
So what was it like on execution?
So it actually went off very smooth. Like rarely does that happen, but it did. But we'd done a lot of other things with them up to that point. And a lot of times it was a shorter turn. They had some piece of intel. We're going to go get this guy. And, they'd show up with a couple Hilux trucks and what almost just looked like a pile of guns and ammo in the back, some homemade, ladders out of 2x4s. And they'd be like, we need you to insert us right here, spot on a map. And then we're going to drive, a couple hundred yards and scale the wall of this compound and grab this guy and come back and be like, okay, sounds good. I mean, we were slapping these plans together in some cases pretty quick. It was almost like a quick reaction force at times where they would give us what they needed to get the request for the aircraft, but it was very basic information. And then on the night of, they would give you some clarifying info and they'd be like, okay, this is where we really need to go. I'd be like, okay, no problem. Like, we figure it out. And
Well, I love
you go
that
put
when
them
you
in there.
have everyone's operating on such a high frequency and they're just so
Yeah.
well tuned that it's very easy for me to come in and say, here you go, the plans change. I'm landing at this spot on the map. And you're like,
Mhm.
okay, give me 15 minutes and I'll see if it's feasible. We'll figure out a plan of attack. Everyone goes into their own spaces for a few minutes and says, yep, check, feasible, let's go. And then
Yeah.
you're like, let's rocket towards this thing. It's really fun when you have people who are all extreme professionals that you just cut through all the nonsense. You just assume professional competence at every level. And
Yeah.
it's great to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a bunch of things that happened. I give the Marine Corps a lot of credit. The wing over there at the time was very willing to work with them and to help us do what we needed to be able to work with them. So there was some concern in the beginning about we hadn't done a lot of low light level landings in the open desert because it's so dangerous. No one really wanted us to do it. And I brought up at the time, like, well, we have these illumination and these other things we can use. Let's use it. And got permission right away. And the KC-130 squadron down the flight line was awesome. We just went out and dropped a bunch of flares one night
Yeah.
while we were doing landings in the open desert to like prove the concept. Like, look, we have this tactical ability. Let's use it. And so then that got integrated into the planning process when we'd work with these guys. So if they put it at some random spot on the map in the middle of the desert, we could go, no problem. Just as long as I have my Herc up there, he'll
Yeah.
drop the illume when I'm on short final. I'll be able to see. I'm still going to brown out. It's going to suck, but we'll get on the ground. You guys get out safe, go do your thing, and we'll come back and pick you up later.
And sometimes it's like the conversations are like legitimately as simple as that.
Yeah, for
Love
sure.
that.
You try to make it as simple as possible. I mean, that's kind of the art in it. Like we alluded to earlier, I always used to say, and I still believe this, the art and tactics is to take something super complicated and make it as simple as possible so that you can actually execute it, especially in aviation, because, you know, if you make it too complicated, you're not going to pull it off.
Dude. Yeah. Because something is always going to
Yeah.
change. And if it's super
Yeah.
complicated, I completely
Yeah, you're just
understand.
stacking the odds against yourself.
Yeah.
Like, don't outsmart yourself. Like,
I like that. I like that. All right. So now I want to know there's this mission that you're on
Yeah.
where all of a sudden, so now you're flying with different aviation assets. So you have different services.
Yeah.
So you were flying with Army Apaches
Yeah.
on specific
Yeah.
missions. How is that talking? So you probably have a lingo and there's a shared understanding when you're talking with skids or
Of course.
Cobra or Huey pilots that we're used to flying with. When you step into and you're now flying with a different service altogether, what is that
Yeah.
learning curve like?
So that deployment was interesting because there were those other units that were sort of organic to the fight that was happening, and we would work with them at times. So there was I think it was 155 BCT, the Mississippi Rifles. It was a guard unit out of Mississippi that personified what you would expect a guard unit out of Mississippi to personify, right? It was like if you just took all these guys who probably were out hunting every weekend and gave them uniforms and different weapons, and here they are in Iraq fighting. And they were awesome. But they also had an Apache unit that was from South Carolina down there. So sometimes when we went to support that unit, we would get escorted by those Apaches instead of our normal, Cobras and Hueys that were organic to the Marine Corps. But it was pretty straightforward. And honestly, they were in some ways easier to plan with the Marines because it was very basic and fundamental to them.
Yeah.
But the terminology was a little different. But you could figure out right away, like talking to them, okay, what are deconfliction measures? Okay, you stay on that side of the line, we'll stay on this one. Which is a little more simplistic than we did it in the Marine Corps. They just called it a line of death.
Yeah.
They're like, we're on this side, you're on that side. Okay, got it. But they were great to work with. I mean, and they totally saved our ass, at least a couple of times.
Yeah, tell me about that. There's a pretty interesting
it's-
story
Yeah,
behind
we
that.
were doing one of those inserts one night, and it was an insert followed by an extract. We're going to put them in and take them out. So when we came back to extract, you typically don't want that extract call to come until the ground force is like literally ready to get on the aircraft. They should be stacked up and ready to jump on. You don't want to be on the ground for very long. Unfortunately,
you're a pretty tasty target.
yeah, it's just a very vulnerable position to be in. So we happened to get in there, and I could tell right away, like, this is a cluster. Like, there's guys running all over the zone. Like, no one knows what the hell's going on. Like, this is not good. And my instinct almost right away was like, we should just take off and go hold again and tell them call us back when you actually are ready. But there was so many people running around the zone, I didn't feel safe even doing that. Like, I'm like gonna hit somebody or something if we try to take off now. So we're on the radio just trying to get them to unscrew themselves and get on the aircraft.
Very eloquently put.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And I was looking out the cockpit. There's like a little building out at by 11 o'clock. and just see like a couple of heads pop out from over there, and I'm like slowing my FLIR over there, like trying to see what's going on, and slowly, sure enough, it's like two, mams, we call them military age males, are slowly emerging from this building. They have what appears to be an RPG. And like I'm watching this happen in real time. And
This is like your worst case.
yeah. And I'm like,
this.
we're sitting here on deck, like we're totally vulnerable. And I'm about to take a shot right in the nose of this aircraft from this RPG. Like he's gonna, like we're screwed, right?
It's gonna roast you guys.
So just right away, immediately called the Apaches and like, yeah, I got military age males, 11 o'clock low. Like looks like he has an RPG. Whatever. It was a quick call. And that guy was awesome. He's, in a very thick South Carolina accent, comes back and is like, I got this.
Dango.
Yeah, and then the next thing you know, he's like right there in front of our nose, and it's just like rocket, threat neutralized. Is like, okay, sweet, we can get out of here now. Like, the guy was a pro. He totally nailed it. They were awesome.
And the Army uses their Apaches different, I think, than we normally use our Cobras and Hueys. I think I've seen it in larger scales. They almost use them they use them as cavalry, right?
Yeah.
And so there's I dare say an aggressiveness at some level that I've worked with Apaches. They're by no means ever throwing shade on Cobras or Hueys, but there was like this, I had to hold them back more often than not, is what it felt like.
Yeah, those guys were definitely aggressive. And that was one of the few Apache units I ever worked with, but they were very aggressive. In a good way, though. They were great escorts.
That's
great
fantastic.
escorts for us. Yeah, so we had that deployment overall was just an adventure. Like all the named operations and getting to work with the task force guys that were over there doing all those things. And then some of that mixing in with the Army and Mississippi Rifles and, the Apaches from South Carolina. It was an awesome deployment.
Fantastic. Okay, so you finish that mission, you cruise out, and then you kind of sunset that deployment and then head home?
Yeah, so we came home in the fall of 2005, and at that point I'm basically due for orders. Like it's time for me to get out of the squadron. I'd already extended, I think, twice. I'd been in the fleet for 5 years already at that point, going on 6. And I'd agreed to go back to MOTS 1 to be an instructor at the Weapons and Tactics Instructor course.
So I feel like you're glossing over that. Like, so the 10% of people that get selected to go to MOTS 1, I would imagine the percentage of people that get asked to come back as an instructor is even smaller.
Yeah, it's pretty small. So, I got the opportunity to do that and said yes. But honestly, I didn't just immediately say yes. It was a lot to think about because I'd just done 3 deployments. We, at home, Carrie and I had this daughter I basically didn't know. I'd been gone for 3 years. I was honestly thinking, like, should I get out of the Marine Corps? Like, do I have any chance of like something resembling a normal life if I keep going? And kind of slowly came to the conclusion, like, okay, I'll go there. It's something I'm passionate about. It's something I want to do. At worst case, I'll stay in for another few years and call it the next generation of these guys who are going to go do this thing. And then I'll figure it out. Like, we'll figure it out while we're there. And so that was kind of the handshake. And so came home from that deployment, got orders, went out there that next spring and checked into the staff in the spring of 2006. And that was a great tour. So spent 3 years on staff there. It was super busy because at the time, not only were we doing the 2 big courses every year, there was also this thing that started called Desert Talon. That was pre-deployment training for all the aviation units going. And those would go in between the WTI classes.
Because everybody was going either to Iraq, Afghanistan was starting to percolate.
So the big machine was churning. And there was a ton of pre-deployment training that had to get done. And then when we weren't doing those things, we would literally travel out to fleet units to do fleet support, where we would be out with just the regular squadrons in the East Coast and West Coast, in some cases Hawaii, giving upper level qualifications, designation. But it was busy. But we were just in the middle of all of it, which was cool. Like, so for someone who appreciates just war fighting and tactics, that's exactly where I wanted to be.
100%. So what was the conversation? So you had now crossed, so you did 6 years initial contract, 3 years at WTI or at MOTS 1, excuse me. And so now you're probably at another inflection point. Stay in, get out.
I was coming up on that inflection point, and I knew I was going to hit it while I was there. So as an aviator, you basically have one real chance to get out, and it's right around that 10th year of service. You're either about to pin on major or maybe you just did, but that's like you've finished your initial obligation. You can leave if you would like to. And I was really kind of struggling with that. And of course, I wasn't saying that to anybody at Mott's One, because the expectation for you when you go to Mott's One is now you're going to stay in this organization long term.
Mhm.
You know, like you've made it here, you need to keep going. But I was struggling with that. And honestly, it was really Carrie who convinced me to stay, which to this day I'm kind of shocked. And it's one of the most selfless things I think I've ever seen her do. But I remember we were in Yuma, Arizona. I was in the kitchen. I was like making dinner on a Sunday, which tends to be something I do. And she just kind of walked in there and casually just said, you know what, you should just stay in the Marine Corps. And at first I thought she was like messing with me, or it was like a trick, you know. Like, why are you saying that? And she just said, you know what, it's important. You're really good at it. We're still at war. We'll figure it out.
Wow. I mean, having
And
that like, I'm sure that you were doing some internal wrestling,
of course,
with this point, knowing also we know when our window is starting to close to make that
yeah.
decision or not. And the hard conversations that you have with your spouse or your partner, and what that's going to look like. And I imagine, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I imagine that helped make the decision a little bit easier, or did it make it
Oh,
harder?
no, it made it easier for sure because I was really struggling with it. Like, you know, I'd been gone so much, it had been hard on both of us, and our relationship, you know, it ebbs and flows. There's good times, there's bad times, but it had been pretty challenging there for those few years when I was gone to Iraq all that time. And when we'd gone to taking those orders and gone to Yuma, kind of the handshake was, okay, let's use these 3 years to try to kind of figure this. But there were no guarantees. It certainly didn't feel like a done deal or like everything was going to be okay, for lack of a better way to put it.
Mhm.
So yeah, her saying like, yeah, why don't you go ahead and stay was a surprise. I'm still kind of surprised she said it. But you know, it definitely clarified things for me. It's like, okay, cool. So now I know exactly what I need to do. I'll do this. That means you're basically signing up for another 10 years at this point.
Yeah,
Otherwise, why wouldn't you?
that's the big one
And
on that
this
ledge.
is what it's going to look like most likely. Okay, then you at least then know like, okay, here's the path. So yeah, we had that conversation on a weekend, and I think the next Monday I went in and got the paperwork from the adjutant and filled it out and turned it in, and it's like, okay, done. Well,
And that
now
was
we're
it.
in. Yeah.
So now, okay, so then you were at Mott's One for 3 years
Yep.
training. I mean, did you have a lot of flight time at Mott's One? Were you
You don't
flying a lot?
fly a ton, not nearly as much as you do in your fleet squadron, but you fly regularly, just between the courses and everything that are spaced out. But then we also spend a fair amount of time, like between classes, like literally re-examining tactics
Yeah,
for the Marine Corps Aviation and having, you know, these like very thoughtful conversations and plans and meetings where we were reviewing tactics manuals and saying like, should we keep doing it this way? Should we do it this other way?
that's
Like,
fascinating.
it was really interesting time to be there because we were getting, at the time we had just started fielding better survivability equipment on the aircraft, the stuff that helps keep you from getting shot down by
Mhm.
certain types of missiles. That allowed us to adjust the tactics a little bit based on having this better gear. At the same time, while I was there, the V-22 was brand new. So while I was on staff, we trained the first two MV-22 instructors and had to start figuring out how to integrate that with the rest of our aircraft and Marine Corps aviation.
Because at one point we had five
Yeah, it
rotor-ish
was
wing
just this, at first it was this oddball platform that didn't really fit with anything else.
that outflew its support
Yeah, so you
aircraft.
couldn't escort it traditionally because it was too fast, but then it got to the objective area and functioned like a helicopter. Like it was this whole problem for Marine Corps aviation to
And you were
solve.
there
And I
on the
was on staff at
fly.
Mott's when we were doing that, like figuring it out. And before we actually had V-22 instructors, the assault support guys, me included, would have to go ride on V-22 jump seat with V-22 pilots to go do their, you know, pre-deployment training stuff with them, which was, I hate doing that. Like I love flying an aircraft, just sitting on the jump seat's terrible.
Yeah, I could
Um,
imagine. So like, because you have no control,
no,
no
none.
ability to influence at anything.
Yeah. And then, you know, at the same time, we're still sort of making it up as we go. And granted, there's people that do this and they had done it, but, you know, I was like, okay, well, this is how we're going to land this thing. And then I would sit on the jump seat and watch them do it and be like, you guys really going to do it that way? Like, that seems crazy to me.
And we
Like,
were we still training frogs
yeah,
as
so it was like the frogs were tailing out. V-22s was about to ramp, but it was an interesting time there to be at the middle of that intersection while all those things were happening in marine aviation. It was cool. And me and essentially all of my peers there ended up tracking from there, like everywhere else we went
No way.
after that. Yeah, it was this interesting little cadre where the vast majority of us had all done a few combat deployments, then ended up at MOTS 1. And then they sent us all to command and staff, the resident command and staff course, and get your master's degree, check in the box, and then right back to the fleet. So when I came back to the fleet as a major in 2010,
Okay.
basically I check in, I'm a major now, so I hate myself. And but all my other peers are checking back in the squadrons as well as, to be department heads. And so I checked back into the squadron I grew up in at 465. And I knew even before I checked in, I was going to take a detachment to Afghanistan for a deployment. So I'd already been tapped for that, and I hadn't walked in the door yet.
Wow.
But
that's got to feel
which
pretty
was
good,
exciting.
though. I mean, there's a lot of trust in there.
Yeah.
Clearly, you have a reputation
For
if you're
sure.
able to walk right in.
Yeah. So they knew me. The guy who had taken over as commanding officer had actually been our operations officer when we went to Iraq the first time.
Okay.
So he had known me a long time. So, I got tapped for that, checked in, had 6 months to basically train the team up and then go. And at the time, the Marine Corps was doing something that to this day I say makes no sense. In the 53 communities, we're taking half a squadron from the East Coast, half from the West Coast, mash them together as one unit, go on deployment. It's a terrible idea for a whole bunch of reasons. But in that case, I was the senior person from the West Coast, and the East Coast commanding officer was coming with the flag.
Were you the XO, OPSO?
I was the OPSO.
Okay.
Which made sense with my background. That was the exact job I should have been in. I just came from MOTS being instructor. Sure. OPSO is where I should be. But we mashed the two units together, but they were in their patch, their call sign. And it was just, there was no rhyme or reason to it. Like the rotation before us, the West Coast brought their CO. So it was just going back and forth. For the most parts, the Marines don't care, but there's definitely a cultural difference between East Coast and West Coast that's pretty real, which is still fascinating to me to think about. Yeah. And of course, in fairness, my guys didn't make it any easier because, I had a handful of smart-ass captains who were even worse than I ever was when I was them, that wanted to have mustaches that were half out of rigs and things that just totally push the buttons of someone who's a little more formal from the East Coast, right? So it was a little rough out of the gate, just trying to integrate the two sides of the unit. And frankly, I don't think the actual Marines gave a damn. This is all mostly happening, in the ready room.
It's almost creative. Yeah, it's like
totally.
We create our own problems sometimes.
Yeah, but then pretty early on in that deployment, we deployed in January. It was the second time I'd left to go into combat deployment on Carrie's birthday, so I still feel pretty good about that. See ya, sorry. Happy birthday. So we left in January and got over there, and it was kind of a struggle out of the gate. But then in early March or mid-March, there was a Task Force 160th aircraft went down on the Pakistani border. And our higher headquarters called us right away. And, it's a math problem. Hey, can you external this thing out of there? And at first they weren't telling us that it was a 160th aircraft. They were just saying it was an Army 47. We assumed it was 160th just because there was nothing on the map out there where the station was.
Sure.
So it's like, who else would be out there
in
this area where supposedly there's nothing? Short version, planned all night. Of course, determined, it is a 160th aircraft. That's the urgency. That's why this is kind of a big deal. Ended up briefing the commanding general next morning. Hey, we can do this tactical recovery of aircraft and personnel. But we weren't going to have any power margin at all. Like basically the way the math worked.
So was there anybody on site on this bird? Were they holding on site? What's the time?
Yeah, so they were doing their own raid and rolled an aircraft over. And so they were able to leave a security team there to protect the aircraft. They finished their mission, but then the aircraft was there with security team. And then I think they brought in some additional security and an Air Force downed aircraft recovery team. But they had like a team of people protecting it, like essentially a perimeter around
Tons of sensitive information on this aircraft.
But it needed to get out of there as quickly as possible.
And so you're on time, like huge.
So we basically do all the math that night, brief the general in the morning. He didn't like it. Because we weren't going to have a margin.
Can you explain the margin?
Yeah. So essentially it's a math problem. So you want to make sure you have a power margin. And our rule was we had to have a 5% power margin. So at the most difficult point of picking up this load, I want to still have a little margin for error, basically, because if I do not, there's just things that can go wrong. Like it's easy to damage my aircraft because I've overstressed it, or if the wind changes a little bit, now I don't have as much power as I thought, or the temperature's off. There's a million variables. So that margin is just, it's a safety margin.
So question number one is, can a 53 lift a 47?
Yes. But a 47 cannot lift a 47. So it had to be a 53.
A little bit of Army,
yes.
Marine Corps.
So it had to be, it was either us or it wasn't coming out of there. And then you have to drop a bomb on it to make it disappear.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was us or nothing.
So you can,
yeah.
Easy math, yes, you can lift it.
Yes.
But now there's a whole bunch of other, external circumstances, altitude,
right,
weather, where they're at.
And I'd taken all that into account when I did the math. So it was like, hey, based on the grid this thing is, altitude, expected temperature at that time of day, all the things was like, yeah, I can do it, but I'm not going to have a margin. Like I can barely do it. Like I'll
skin of your teeth kind of thing.
And that was after we stripped about 5,000 pounds off of our aircraft.
Yeah, what'd you strip
to
off,
make
by
the
the way?
aircraft, to make the problem work? We took all the armor out of the floorboards. No guns, no field probe. Like we were very vulnerable.
So wait, so no guns. So
Nope.
so you
Took our guns out of the
typically
windows.
what 350 cals? Aft, is that what you guys call it, right?
Yeah,
So your
on the
rear
ramp. Yeah,
the ramp and
usually
two-
have someone on the ramp and then the two doors. No guns, and only took 2 aircrew in the back. And it was 2 guys I've been flying with forever. Thankfully, both of them were pretty thin, so they were like it was like
It's like that,
yeah,
right?
It was
So extra armor floorboard kind of
yeah.
stuff
All
out.
the armor came out of the floorboards, everything. Like we flew out there essentially
Did you have to ramp
totally
up,
naked.
Did you have to ramp up your escorts because you did?
No, so this is the crazy part. It was so far from where we were to get out there that we couldn't even take escorts. The legs were too long for
'Cause why not?
for Cobras or Hueys to fly with us the whole way, and there was no one that could pick us up. So just to get there, we had to fly a very long way, totally unprotected, just to get there.
Did you have
And
to
then
get gas on the way?
No. So we had just enough to fly out there, but so it turns out when we started in the planning, there is a little forward operating base where all those guys are operating out of. The whole all the super secret squirrel guys are at this place. So once we knew it was there, we were like, okay, we can just fly there, land at their little base. And then we had auxiliary tanks that were always on a 53, but we had to take bomb carts and take those off because that was the last bit of weight to lose to go to the lift. But we needed them to get there. So we ended up configuring 2 aircraft for the lift. I was the primary. Our commanding officer was flying the flying backup, configured the same. Because we agreed, he and I, like, it needs to be one of us that does this. Like, it needs to be one of the 2 most qualified people in the unit.
So it comes
to
down
try this.
So it comes down now back to what we talked about earlier. It's not just rank; it's
Yeah.
qualifications and experience that comes into this. Okay,
And we both agreed, like, it needs to be one of us. So, I'll be the primary.
And it's high risk,
He's the
so-
secondary. Yeah, there's a super high risk, super high visibility.
So as
like,
leaders-
this is one of those things, like, this could go sideways in a hurry. But we configured 2 aircraft for the lift and then had another flying aircraft with us that had Marines, maintainers, the bomb carts, everything we needed to take those tanks off when we got there to prep.
wow.
And so we ended up getting the word, briefed the general in the morning and went to bed not knowing if we were going or not. It still hadn't been decided. And then a few hours later, one of my captains came and woke me up and was all fired up. I was like, hey, sir, you guys are going. Like, grab your go bag and get your stuff. Like, this is happening.
So when you briefed the general, what was that conversation like? So he was a Marine aviator
Yep.
as well, or naval aviator?
Yeah, naval aviator. He was our commanding general forward there. And he actually ended up becoming the assistant commodore of the Marine Corps a few years later.
Wow.
Great dude. But it was a very straightforward brief where I just showed him, okay, sir, like, here's the route, here's where we're going. This is what the math looks like. Can I do it? Yes, but barely. Like, I have no margin. And, he didn't.
And so you guys can like talk pilot to one another.
Yeah,
as well.
totally.
Was he rotor wing or
He
fixed
was,
wing?
yeah, he was a pilot also. He understood what we were talking
Okay.
about. He had a rotary wing background, so he was like, yeah, I know what you're saying, but he didn't love it, but he knew. He knew it was going to be dangerous. So I don't know exactly what happened after we left his office, but we left there without an answer. I knew he didn't like it. And at this point, it's, I don't know, 9 or 10 in the morning. We went and got some to eat and went to sleep because we were on this schedule. We were coming in to the squadron like 10 o'clock at night. take over at midnight, fly till sunrise. That was the schedule I was on at the time.
Do they call you guys like vampires or something like
Well,
that?
no, we set it up to where you have crews that are going from like, call it 6, 7 p.m. till midnight, and then other crews come in behind them, fly till sunrise. You just kind of push all the squadron operations to the hours of darkness if you can.
Okay.
But we had a whole system for how you'd kind of call it swinging through those shifts. So you might be on the morning schedule for a few weeks, then swing over to the other one for a couple of weeks. But we always made sure we had the right number of people with certain qualifications on both, so you could cover anything that came up.
And that's the OPSO's job.
Yeah,
right?
that whole thing was my job to orchestrate all of that.
Okay.
To make sure we had the right crews and the right schedules and the right places all the time, and then people still available to go to planning sessions and all of the other. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Orchestrating all that. But finally went to sleep, get woken up. Hey, you guys are going. Got back down to the squadron, and that captain that worked for me, he was awesome. And so I had an assistant officer who was also awesome. And those two guys had done a ton of work, got me a bunch more detail. So they're both talking 1,000 miles an hour. Give me the last few things I need. I'm like, okay, cool, got it.
And you're like mission mode.
Yeah,
now.
I'm like, yeah, I'm in the zone. I'm ready to go.
So there's a big difference between briefing a crazy ass mission and then getting approved for a crazy ass mission. You're like, oh God, now I got to do this.
Yeah, it's like, all right, this is happening.
Okay.
And it was cool actually, because the commanding general came down to our spaces to talk to me right before we walked.
So this is like stratospheric big deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah. And I knew that. Like, that aircraft was a big deal. That unit's a big deal. There's a reason. Like, they're amazing at what they do. They're extremely important to everything we're doing as a country and everywhere, but in country at that time for certain. So I understood how big of a deal it was and how high profile it was. But, so the CG came down to give me the speech she's supposed to, and was like, hey, make the right call out there. If it doesn't look right, if it doesn't feel right, it is what it is. Like, don't push it. Essentially, is what he was telling me. And I said, yes, sir. But at the time I was thinking like, yeah, I'm doing this. Like, this is happening.
2 guns up. Let's do this, right?
Yeah, we're getting this thing. Like, we're going to get it. Or I'm going to die. Like, I'm with the 2 options. Like, there's no middle. There's no scenario where I fly out there and go, the wind doesn't look right. Like, that's not happening.
Yeah.
Like, we're doing this. And so it was awesome. We ended up flying out there, middle of the night, landed, did a quick brief with those guys, picked up some Apache escorts from some different Apaches that were hanging out down there to go into the objective area. And then, worked out. Got in there and did a couple pilot things and got it hooked up. And
so so you said there's an Air Force like recovery?
Yeah, there was a downed aircraft recovery team that was on site that was supposed to be prepping the aircraft for us. And I'd requested through the chain that went to them to use these extra long slings, because my plan when I went in there was originally, I'm going to land on the right side of this thing. These slings are so long I can just hook up on the ground and then pick up, get tension on, and go. It'll make it way easier. Well, when we got there into the objective area, I quickly realized that plan wasn't going to work, because the aircraft had rolled over on its right side and they had righted it, so they'd be able to pull it back upright with the MRAP, like one of the vehicles. But there were just pieces of fiberglass all over the landing zone that were formerly the blades of that aircraft. And so I knew I can't go hover up here and land, because I'm going to suck all those pieces of fiberglass up into my rotor system, and then we're going to have 2 downed aircraft.
Right, that's
on the zone.
FOD?
Yeah, like it would be bad.
Objects and
foreign object damage.
Oh, okay.
So it would have been really bad. So I had to go to the left side of that aircraft, and there wasn't room over there to land. There was like pretty much just enough space to get the fuselage of my aircraft between the 47 and this wall of a compound that was to my left.
Because why wouldn't there be a wall of a compound?
So I was like, okay. So we had to change the plan in the zone. Okay, we're going to go to the left side, and then I'm going to have to hover to get hooked up. I'm going to brown out, so it's going to suck, but we have no choice. But the other thing that had come up was we had a really strong crosswind that we weren't anticipating, like 45 knots. So it was a lot.
Can you put that into terms that I would understand?
Yeah. So, roughly over 50 mile an hour winds, like the wind's blowing really hard. And so you always want to be oriented into the wind when you're taking off or landing. Like, you want the wind coming at your nose.
It provides you lift?
Yes.
Okay.
It helps with lift. If it's coming from the side like that, it's very problematic to your lift vectors. It creates a lot of problems. So you want to get oriented into the wind. So I already knew, trying to pick this thing up, we're going to be right on the line. I have to somehow get oriented into the wind to have a chance.
So then you have to fly into this thing adjacent to the bird and then turn
Yeah.
leftish.
Yeah, it was going to be to my right.
Right.
But
Okay.
so I told our crew chiefs, like, okay, look, here's the thing. Like, we're going to come over here, we're going to hover. And then once I'm hooked up and we have tension on, I'm going to try to turn into the wind before I take off. And I knew that based on the length of the slings, the aft end of the 47 would break the deck first. And then once that happened, I felt like I could probably just turn it because only the nose wheel would be on the ground. And I remember telling our crew chiefs that, and they both looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah.
They were like, "Yeah, okay." I was like, that's the only shot we have. Like,
We have
to
one
try.
chance.
Yeah, we
at
have
this
to try.
thing. Yeah.
So picked up, get over there, hooked up. Hovering was terrible. The thing I remember about it was I had no reference, so I was basically just flying off what my crew chiefs were telling me. I could barely see the top of this compound wall, but the thing that I could see, like out in the distance, was one of those Afghan graveyards that has the sticks with the pieces of cloth on them.
Yeah.
It's the creepiest thing in
Yeah.
the world. And this is like right at sunrise. Like, so we set it up to do it. It's the coldest time of day. So right at sunrise, flip the goggles up, pick up, and we're gonna do this. And so you're looking at this creepy like graveyard top of this wall. And it seemed like it took forever, but it only took a few seconds. We got hooked up, got up, bring tension online, and then tried to execute my plan. I was like, okay, he's like, okay, the aft end's coming up. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna rotate it right. And I did it. I'll never forget. My crew chief yelled, he's like, holy shit, it's working. like it's a surprise to him. He's like, oh my God, like it's working. And we got it into the wind and then, got it off the deck and then ran out of power. Like we were out. We had no more power we could pull. The guy I was flying with was awesome. And he was very good at managing what we call the speed control levers, which, can rev an engine up or pull it back. So he's basically making sure we don't damage an engine while we're doing this. So I had everything the aircraft could give me, and we weren't moving forward. We were just kind of stuck. But I knew instinctively to do this. So basically what I did is fed a little left pedal, which all this does is it puts the aircraft in what's called a slip. So it took a little torque off the tail rotor and gave me a little power back that I could then translate to the main rotor. So it kind of put the aircraft into what's called a slip, and then it was sort of like chug, 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 and then we were able to like get a little airspeed on and then get it going and fly it out.
Holy moly.
Yeah, so it was like as close as you can get to running out of power without running out. Like it took everything.
So running out of power is basically there's nothing left in the tank that you could ever give this bird to get another thing off the ground.
It's the equivalent of like just having your gas pedal floored on the open highway once your car hits the point where it absolutely just can't go any faster.
And you had to run this thing.
Yeah, we were on the edge of every limit that the aircraft had.
Oh my gosh.
For a few seconds there. And then
so how long did this take to like?
It took a few seconds in real time. As it was happening, it felt like it was taking an eternity.
Was there a moment where you knew? Or like, first question, was there a moment where you're like, right, this isn't going to work? And then was there like, oh my God, this is actually working?
I was strangely confident throughout the whole thing. Like, I think, we can pull this off. I was confident in all of the math and all the preparation we'd done that the numbers were accurate. It was just a question of, I was just going to have to execute the pilot part. Like, wow. If I could just execute the pilot part, we would be okay. Like the plan was good. I just had to be able to do it. But I also felt like, everything I'd done at that point in my career, and I still think of it this way, was to get me ready to fly that one mission.
Yeah.
Long range, high threat, heavy lift,
high fidelity,
nasty landing zone.
Zero chance.
Yeah, like all of those things. Like it's the mission every 53 pilot wants to fly, and I got to do it. So, and I knew like this is it. Like this is going to be your pinnacle thing you probably ever get to do. So, so don't screw it up. Like go do it. So it was just a question of just if we could execute it, we were able to do that. So it was awesome.
So then you power up, you gain some forward thrust.
Yep.
And you're able to climb and get some altitude.
Yeah, then we were able to fly it out of there. Then once we got it flying, it was fine. I mean, when you're flying an external load that's that big and heavy, you feel it for sure. And to some degree, it's like it's flying you. I mean, it's like you have like a giant barn door hanging off the bottom of the aircraft. So your aircraft is being moved around by that aircraft for certain.
Is there a delay? So like when you put a throttle input in, I'm assuming that's a pendulum of some sort.
It
And
is,
so
yeah.
then there's a delay between when you're thrusting forward to when this thing, so that it kind of swings back
Yeah,
a little
well,
bit.
so we're using a dual point hook system, which is actually pretty stable.
Okay.
So it'll move around some, but for the most part, it's keeping it really in place where it needs to be. But you do feel it. It's just like a gentle swaying. It's like, but you
Yeah,
feel
but
it tugging on your
of
aircraft.
thousands of
Yeah, like our
pounds of.
aircraft is getting tugged this way. Now it's getting tugged that way. Like you feel it.
Do
But
you climb higher into altitude, or because then it, or do you have to
no,
stay
we
pretty
still
low?
flow the same profile because then when you get where you're going, you have to shoot a normal approach and then set it on the ground and not try not to break it worse. So yeah, it was just the normal altitudes we were flying, which I think at the time we were actually transiting up over 1,000 feet because our survivability equipment was better, but it wasn't very far from the forward operating base where we had taken off to get it to
Okay.
go back. So we didn't have to take it too far.
So like a pucker factor, but
Yeah.
not for a terrible amount of
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah, I want to say it's like I don't know, 30-minute flight or something
Oh no,
back
that's a
with
lot of
that
pucker
team.
factor.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a long
it
time.
wasn't too
I
bad.
think you're being very kind here,
Yeah.
but that's a long time to be
Yeah.
tense.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. And then dropping it off was way easier than picking it up. So we get back, dropped it off, and it was like, all right, we did it. Like it was
And
awesome.
so you drop back off at this other base, and
Hmm.
then do you land there and
Yeah, we had to.
refuel,
Yeah, we had to land, refuel, put our
clean your
aircraft
armpits
back.
out?
Yeah, put our aircraft back
Right.
together. And at that time, at that point, we were totally out of what they call crew day. Like we were illegal to do anything else, so
Yeah.
we had to stay there. And they were great. They gave us a couple of tents and what we needed to crash there. And everyone had their little go packs and their chow hall. So we ate and went to sleep and woke back up a few hours later, and then flew back to our home base.
So it's like these unsung victories that I think are so
Yeah.
emblematic of what the United States military can create,
Hmm.
is these moments in time where, people can judge and have their own opinions on conflicts and whatever happens. One of the things that I try to find in these stories is this moment of where everything, it's the culmination of the totality of someone's being, of coming
Yeah.
together in this moment, in this space, and saying, I have to do this because the mission, the soldiers, out there demand it, and it's for our nation. Like, I
Yeah.
think that that's incredibly huge to do that.
Well, it was also just, it meant a lot to me to be able to not only work with the Night Stalkers, but to help those guys. I mean, they're the best of the best, right? They are the epitome of assault support aviation tactics. Everyone knows it. I mean, all the WTIs in the Marine Corps, me included, would be like, oh, we're good too, right? But I mean, all those guys do is direct action stuff with operators. That is literally that's what they do. They're part of SOCOM. They're amazing. So it was really cool to be able to help those guys out in a situation where they could use a little bit of help.
Were they there on deck when you landed? Were they at that base at
No,
all?
but they were at that base where we pre-staged. That's where they lived.
Yeah.
So it was cool to interface with them there before we went to try to get their aircraft, and then interface with them again when we came back. But
Did they like fist bump you? Like, what's up,
no,
brother?
no, they're a little too calm for that. They're very professional all the time, or at least around us. I don't know
Yeah.
what they're like when it's just them, but anytime we were around, they were always very. It was all business, but they were great. But the thing about it that felt the best was after it was over and we'd done it, was they already get more requests than they can fill. But in doing that one mission, it kind of validated our unit as being a viable alternative if you couldn't get them per se. And so what started happening
And the
is,
platform
yeah,
itself.
so their column overflow requests started going to the Marine Aircraft Wing to then come to us. So that one mission, it did a few things. One, it like totally solidified the unit as a unit. So this, what felt like this terrible arranged marriage before, immediately felt like everything's good now. It was like,
It was a very needed win, like a
yes,
victory.
it was a huge win for all of the Marines in the unit, and it really kind of got all of us past the BS of like, I'm West Coast, I'm East Coast,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and we're all guilty of it to some degree, me included, right? But that it kind of put all that to bed. Everyone clicked, everyone came together, and it was perfect timing because it was early in the deployment, and all of a sudden they started giving us all these overflow missions, and we had a great unit we had, I think in the unit all together there were like 9 or 10 WTIs, which is very unusual to have that kind of depth. But because we did, we were able to do what then happened was we started getting so many named operations we were doing almost every night. And then going back to my 2005 in Iraq, thinking no one will ever do more than 68. We ended up doing, it was like 180 or I mean, it was something totally crazy.
Like blew it out of the water.
Yeah. It was just, once it was game on, it was game on. And it was really neat to be there during that time because, we had the surge going. It felt like gloves off. We can actually go fight now. And we were. And so even though we're an assault support platform, I'm not a shooter. I'm not pulling triggers. But just for the whole force, I felt like it's game on. Like we could actually just go do these things.
Yeah.
Like, and we can go fight, like really go fight.
Man, unlocked a totally different aspect of just.
It was amazing and getting to work with all the units there. And of course, it was a couple of months after we did the recovery that the 160th and those guys flew the Bin Laden raid, got him. So we're in country when all that happened.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so that's my question. I know that, the Bin Laden raid, I know that everyone's, overstudied this and because I know that there was a Black Hawk variant that went down. When you were describing the story about picking up this 47, I was thinking about like the wind and like up channels and updrafts. I don't know the terminology for it, but not only, so you have a hillside of some sort on one side, you have a crashed bird, then you have a compound on your left side. How are you able as a pilot to gauge that? And then once you get in, can you feel
You can feel it, but honestly, it's the guys on the ground. So there was, I think it was a JTAC who was with the Downed Air Force recovery team or the Downed Aircraft recovery team for the Air Force. So he was calling winds, but then the guy's call sign, I believe, was Tiger Shark. The Apaches also were good at determining winds. So it was like, guy ground says this, and the Apache's like, no, it's actually this. And I was like, okay, verify. And then
so
they came
tons
back
of
and told
input.
me, yeah. Yeah. So then you're like, okay, that's hope. It's just helpful information that they're pushing you. Like, okay, these are your wins. And this is what
and
you have
no
to assume.
ego involved at all, right? Just sensory input.
Just facts.
And then, pulling, man, I love that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
Yeah, just facts. But it was cool. So that, like the night they did the Bin Laden raid, they'd given us another raid to do, and me and this captain that worked for me had flown it. And we were kind of joking beforehand, like, what are they up to tonight that they gave us this? Because they gave us one that we thought was kind of high speed. And so we could do it and then come back. It's like 3 a.m. or whatever. Well, back into the squadron, and everyone's like, oh, they got Bin Laden. We were like, oh, that's what they're doing. Oh, good for them. Yeah, too bad we didn't get to go along with that one.
No kidding. No kidding. Okay, so then this is 2010 crossing into 11.
2011, yeah, we deployed in January of 11, and then we were essentially there until the end of the summer. And 144, that was the number named ops ended up doing.
144?
Yeah, so we more than doubled the old record.
I don't math in public, so doubled it.
144. It was a lot. But it didn't start out that way. But once we did that trap mission, it was like game on.
So that was
we were
very
doing stuff
early on
night.
in the deployment? You did that trap mission?
It was March 20th. So almost 8 years to the day for my first combat flight where I crashed in the port of Umkasar. Literally.
Redemption. Finally, absolutely.
7 years, 364 days later, like almost 8 years to the day.
What?
That those two missions happened.
Would you, as lieutenant, would you have in 2003 think that you would have been doing?
No.
Right. Like,
not in a million years.
That's what's kind of cool to see the plane and trajectory on this.
Yeah. Not at all. I mean, I'd say that about my career as a whole. Like, if someone told me beforehand, like, "Hey, all these things are going to happen," I would probably just laugh in disbelief. Like, there's no way. Like, there's no way all of those things are going to happen, and you're going to be in all these places, and no way.
So after this deployment, you come back. You are a senior major with an operations officer billet under your belt. What's next?
So technically, at that point, I've checked the boxes I'm supposed to check, right? I've got a current overseas control date. I just went to combat again. I'm a senior major. I'm PME complete. I'm done. Like, I'm waiting to see what happens on a promotion board and a command slate 2 years after that, roughly. So I was supposed to just go back to the squadron and be in the squadron for 1.5 years. And at the time, our squadron was just, after that deployment, got pulled back out of the rotation. It was like this never-ending musical chairs with what units are doing what. Mm-hmm. So we were just going to go back to creating Marine, detachments for Marine expeditionary units. So I got placed as the squadron executive officer, so like the number 2 in the squadron behind the commanding officer, which was great because it exposed me to all the other pieces of the squadron that I hadn't really been involved with before. I'd always either been in operations or maintenance. I didn't know much about S1 or the S2 shop. How does that actually work? Or the logistics guys in the S4.
Right.
So it was cool because it made me learn all those other ancillary pieces of the squadron and just be in the middle of all of that. And I was supposed to just stay there until I was up for orders, which would have been about a year and a half later. Summer of 14, I think it was. No, 13. I should have been up for orders again. So it had about a year and a half to kill. But, as things go, we got through the holidays, and the next spring we had a Marine Expeditionary Unit detachment that was getting ready to go. And I was fortunate enough to be called a last-minute replacement to be the detachment officer in charge for that detachment.
So there's a little bit of backstory here. Would you care to elaborate?
Yeah. So there was another officer, and he's a great dude. He was supposed to do it. And him and our commanding officer went up to brief the higher level headquarters, Marine Aircraft Group 16, for a pre-deployment brief. Hey, this is what we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. Which is very routine to go to these pre-deployment briefs. And our advanced party had already left on this deployment.
So we are weeks from deployment.
It's like 2 weeks from deployment.
Yeah.
We've got Marines who are already in Okinawa doing turnover.
Technically, the deployment's already started.
Yes.
Right.
Like this is underway. And they go to do this pre-deployment brief, and they've been gone for a while. But I thought nothing of it. It was very routine. And then I got a call from my counterpart at higher headquarters, and he said, hey, the MAGCO just decided we need a new detachment officer in charge for this deployment, and your squadron has 1 day to nominate somebody else. And I was like, well, it's me. Like there's nobody else. That,
looking around.
I'm like, no, we don't have any other majors that have all the quals that you're supposed to have to go do this, because it's a shipboard deployment. So you have to have all your ship stuff has to be current, everything. And I was current on everything, of course. So I was like, it's me. Like that's the list. And he was like, okay, well, we're going to look at a couple of the other units to see. And I was like, this is totally happening. So I went home early that day.
Oh, God.
And walk in the house. And, of course, Carrie's like, why are you here? She's like, wait, what bad thing is happening?
She has this totally. Marine Corps sixth sense.
Yeah.
She knows at this point.
And I was like, I'm probably going on another deployment, but I won't know for sure till tomorrow. I gotta go, they're gonna tell me tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, like it is what it is. Like,
bless her
yeah.
heart.
And then sure enough, next day I went back, back at the squadron in the hangar, and I get summoned to mag commanding officer would like to see you. And I'm like, all right, this is the.
And the mag commanding officer, what rank is that?
He's a colonel, full colonel.
Okay. So something must have happened there, and we don't need to elaborate on it, but something.
Yeah, he made a decision. I went and saw him personally, and I'm still friends with him. I get along with him to this day. Great guy. And he basically what he said was just like, look, I just wasn't going to feel good about this if it wasn't someone of your caliber, I think is how he put it, doing this, no offense to anybody else. He's like, but I want to make sure, I want to feel like those Marines are totally taken care of, and I know if you go that they will be. He's like, so you go take care of that. I'll keep it on the squadron back here, and then we'll go from there when you get home. And I just said, okay, sir, no problem.
What a beautiful burden to have, right? To be, because you're the guy, right? You're it. You're the A-lister, right?
For sure.
You are the major that you were looking up to as a lieutenant, right? But that has a heavy cross to bear.
Yeah. And, it was a little bit challenging. I always jokingly refer to it as my bonus deployment because I wasn't supposed to have one. But, we went to Okinawa. That was one of the last places they still had 46s flying at the time. Yeah. So that was kind of fun to get to be part of a frog unit and get on a boat there for the 31st MEU. And they were not expecting me. They were expecting someone very different. So they didn't really even have a job for me in the squadron when I got there. Yeah, so under normal circumstances at that phase of my career, I would have probably been the executive officer or at least one of the other couple of big billets as a major, but all that stuff was already set. And their commanding officer was great. He's just like, look, because you can hang your hat in S1, but what I really need your help with is training everybody and getting us ready to get on the ship. He's like, you've got all these qualifications, you're a monster, blah, blah, blah. Like, just help us get everyone called.
You kind of got to be like a gunner, like a Marine gunner, right?
So
you're just really an expert that shows up and I'm here to help people out.
Yeah. So really what I did, my job was just helping everyone with mission planning and planning all these missions. And then I was the de facto air mission commander for basically the entire workup and everything we did. And I was training other people at the same time. So every time we were doing it, I was getting someone else a qualification or a sign off. So it was, it was value added. And it was kind of fun for me just to totally focus on the aviation piece and taking care of my debt. I mean, our debt was, I think I had 60 Marines and they were awesome. So I would just do stuff for our detachment, like on the weekends. I'd be like, hey, what do you guys want to do this? Like, I would get a bus from MCCS and take them all to the aquarium, or let's go to the,
Love that aquarium,
let's go to the battle sites tour. Let's all caravan up to go eat at Pizza in the Sky. Or, I wanted them to get off the base, experience the island, have a good experience. And anytime there was nothing else I could come up with, I would just say, hey, everyone meet at the bowling alley on Saturday night at 8:00.
Love that.
Just to get all the Marines together. 100%. And then you can keep an eye on everybody and no one gets too out of hand and you kind of police yourselves.
And you're building this camaraderie that's outside of just turning wrenches or, turning rotors. You get to be able to see people on a different level. I think that's actually pretty integral to a unit.
Yeah. And I loved doing that stuff, and I just personally always enjoyed just being around the Marines and being in those situations where you can just talk to them and get to know them and have. And they always say, sometimes they'll say the craziest things to you,
I've always wanted to write a book that says, the title of the book that we joked about was, I Can't Make This Up. Yeah. Right. It was like stories from Marines, right?
Totally. I love that kind of stuff too. It was just so fun to be in that environment, spend that time with them. So, I mean, bonus deployment, that sucks. But I was like, make the most of it, make this a good experience for these guys. Yeah. And, do your thing.
So you're coming back from the 31st MEU, and now that would be your 5th deployment?
Six total, yeah. Okay, so second as a major, 6 total. But I was up for orders that next summer, and I knew it. And I didn't want to take orders because I also knew I just actually found out I got selected for lieutenant colonel, which meant I would be considered for command on the next command slate. And so I knew if I execute orders, I'm going to execute orders. And then like 3 months later, the command slate's going to come out. So I could execute order somewhere and then not even be done unpacking and find out I'm going somewhere else. Yeah. And I was really hoping to avoid that scenario, but essentially got told, no, you're going to the Pentagon regardless, to what was called Aviation Hallway, to work for the Deputy Commandant of Aviation. And then if you slate for command, great. Then you'll just go wherever you're going the next year. So at the time, the Deputy Commandant of Aviation had made a decision where he told his staff, like, I want his words, I want the best officers I can get. And if they're only here for a year, I don't care. Okay. Bring them here for a year, let them do their thing, and then they can go take command. It's fine. So that was my fate. I don't really have a say in it, but it was, hey, sorry, load up the family. We're moving back to the East Coast. So all the way across country.
You have two children
at that point. Yeah, we had 2. So our son had been born when we were in Yuma, so he was still a little guy. Yeah. But head back to the East Coast, check into the Pentagon, great education. I learned a ton of stuff there.
Yeah, what's it like working at the Pentagon?
It's fascinating. I mean, it's terrible and fascinating at the same time.
Sure.
Like, it's a great education. Like, I love that aspect of it. But once you understand like how things work, then it also will just like kind of freak you out, make you never want to pay your taxes again. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe like this is how these decisions are made. Like, are you guys serious? Like, this is how this works? Like, it's wild. I mean, I remember, like, side story, I was in charge of the budget for Marine Corps Aviation at the time, which is basically just all the gas money the Marine Corps needs to fly all the aircraft all year. And there's this whole crazy process and system behind justifying this number. It's like $2.5 billion. But what happened was we had something pop up and we needed to send the F-18 unit, the Marine Corps did, to go take care of something bad was going on. Those flight hours had not been accounted for. So I needed like another, I don't remember the number, $80 million to pay for.
Yeah, you probably stole that from the grunts.
Yeah. So it's, you have to work with the Navy, we're Department of the Navy, but this whole bottom line, I ended up in some other random office in the Pentagon with these 2 women who were in charge of the purse strings, and both of them looked like they might have been in their late 20s, and I'm like this Marine major, haven't been on lieutenant colonel yet, like justifying like why I need this $80 million for these guys to go do this thing, and she's like, and in the end they're just like, yeah, okay, no problem, and, type it in the computer, it's done. Great, you got your $80 million.
I also need a bonus.
Yeah, go back and tell your boss, hey sir, we're good. We got them what they need. They're ready to go. He goes and tells Deputy Commandant Aviation, and everything's good. But it was an education being in that building for a year, but it happened exactly how I thought it might. Got there, checked in, started working, and then I didn't even bring the family at first because the kids weren't out of school yet. I had to be there like in May. Kids didn't get up till June. So then at some point I flew back out here, drove across the second time with them. We literally weren't done unpacking when the command slate came out, and I got command of a West Coast unit, which is what I wanted.
So can you talk through the command slate? So I think that's actually really cool. I think that there are, in the infantry side, there are 26-ish Marine infantry battalions. And so the ratio of lieutenant colonels who get selected to take over an active infantry battalion is very, very small.
Yeah.
And so what is it like on the aviation side?
It's the same. So, at the time, I think we were down to, we still had 4 on the West Coast. I think we had 3 on the East Coast. So there was really, and 1 in Hawaii. So there were 8 squadrons. But there's a slate every year, but most of the command tours are 18 to 24 months. So in a given year, there's 4 or 5 spots available.
And how many lieutenant colonels are vying for that?
There's a bunch. And also it keeps going. So like the first year you're eligible, you get looked at on the slate. But if you don't get it that year, you get looked at a second time and a third time. So it's just this pool of officers that exists that are all eligible for this slate. So it's not even necessarily your direct peer group. There's guys who are a couple, in some cases 3 years senior to you, that are still in the hopper hoping to get picked up for a squadron. So it was interesting. So I was fortunate in that I got on, selected on my first look, got a West Coast squadron, which is what I wanted.
Wow.
So I knew that was happening, and I was just going to come right back to the West Coast the next summer.
Was that an easy conversation to have with Carrie? Like, hey, we're going back? Or
yes and no. Like, that's what we both wanted. I mean, I'd been a career Miramar guy at that point, so certainly that's where I wanted to finish and come back. And just as a family, San Diego had kind of become home. Yeah. Like, we sort of jokingly referred to it as our Marine Corps home back then. And, we'd kept our house here when we left. So it was the place we wanted to be. It was just a pain in the butt to move across country 2 summers in a row. But it is what it is. So we got back here that next summer in 2014 and got ready to take command of a squadron.
And what squadron did you take command of?
HMH 462, the heavy haulers. So up until that point, I'd only ever been in 465. So it was interesting that I crossed over to 462, which I was happy about because 462 has a really long, proud history. Yeah. And I'd always admired that squadron because, at the risk of making it sound bad, it's cult-like in a way.
No.
It's one of those units where years and years ago, Vietnam era, they started unofficially referring to themselves as the screw crew. The idea being that they got left overseas longer than they were supposed to. They got screwed. So that's the connotation. Like their badge of honor. Yes, but screw crew is very much a badge of honor. And it's also probably the most common tattoo in the 53 community is this little screw. That's the logo, even though it's not the official name or logo of the unit. But cool unit, has a ton of history, tradition. So going there was pretty neat.
But also back at Hangar 4.
Yep, back in Hangar 4. Back home.
Can you tell me, I don't know if you had decided at that point if you were going to sunset your career after command, because that's usually another, inflection point. The 10 years is an inflection point. The 20-ish years is an inflection point. When you're walking back into Hangar 4 and you're in your alphas and you got the silver oak leaves, right? And you're checking back in and you are the boss. Like, what was that like, parking your car and coming from the parking lot?
It felt a little bit surreal at that point. If you'd have told me not that long before you're going to end up being the commanding officer of one of these squadrons, I would have laughed and be like, you're right. Like, that's ridiculous. I mean, so surreal, but I also just felt like responsible, right? Like going into command, there were 2 things I was very aware of. Was one, that I wanted to make it a great experience for the Marines. Like, it had to be about the Marines and make that experience as good for them as possible. And the other piece was just that, like, the weight of the responsibility for the stewardship of the unit and the unit history and the unit's name and all of those things, and understanding, like, in the grand scheme, when this is all over, I'm going to be one of 100 guys who's had this job, right? But you want to make sure your time on the watch, like, you don't screw it up. Like,
Yeah.
don't be that one,
Yeah.
you know? So I was aware of that, but it was a cool thing to have the opportunity to come back to do that. I mean, and I'd been part of those squadrons there at Miramar and Hangar 4 my whole career. I mean, that's where I did all of my fleet time. So, by the time it was over, I'd spent more than half of my career in that hangar in those squadrons, which is really cool. That's the only place I wanted to be.
My goodness.
Yeah, it was neat. So going back in there to do that was a great experience. And at that point, the war was winding down, thankfully. So, we just did the unit deployment stuff to Okinawa, nothing crazy.
When did you deploy to Okinawa?
That next summer. So it was summer of 15. So, or basically deployed in the spring, came home in the fall.
Okay.
So I took command in like late 14 and then gave it up in the summer of 16. So in that summer of 15 in the middle, we were overseas and bouncing all over the Pacific and doing things.
So
it was fun.
What's the role? I know what a role, and I understand the scope and scale as an infantry commander.
Yeah.
What the job of a lieutenant colonel is in the infantry, but what is it in a squadron?
Well, ultimately, to be responsible for whatever happens, good or bad.
Does or fails to do,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, you got to own whatever happens. But really just ensuring that I always just thought of it this way. My job is to put all the Marines in a position to be successful. So does maintenance have everything they need to be successful on their end? Does the ops team have what they need to make a great training plan? Do we have a great training plan? Is that going well? Like, does everyone have what they need? So you spend a lot of your time not only like setting, call it the cultural tone of the unit, because that's really a responsibility too. This is how we want to function with each other, and we're going to care about each other and want everyone to get the most out of this. But you also spend some of your time advocating with higher headquarters about various things on behalf of your Marines, and you have a partner in that, and a unit has a sergeant major, just like a battalion. I thankfully got handed a great one, so we worked really well together. I had a couple of really strong majors, and at every rank, we had a couple of really strong players. So it was a great group to work with, super rewarding to get to do that. And I knew, like, going into that, I was pretty sure that was the last thing in the Marine Corps I wanted to do.
Okay.
I didn't say that right away, but I kind of felt like this is it. This is what I enjoy, is being in the squadron and being with the Marines and like really doing these things. I had a hard time imagining myself being, well, for starters, the Marine Corps probably should never send me to the Pentagon, because I got to see what 06 really looks like for most of them.
Also true. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
I've heard that a lot.
Those colonels at the Pentagon, God love them. But I knew, like, I don't want to be that. Like, I don't want to end up where that guy's sitting. That doesn't look at all fulfilling or fun. It just looks like getting punched in the face every day. Like, that looks brutal. And so I kind of felt like this is it. I want to do this, because in even 06 Command, especially in the aviation side, you're a layer removed from the squadrons. And I obviously never did it, so I don't know. I mean, I've had friends who have stuck around and did it and seem to enjoy it, but I just like being in the squadron with the Marines, like really being with them. And so I knew, like, okay, well, I'll do that, then I'll probably go do something else, which was somewhat, not everybody loved that I made that decision inside the Marine Corps. But I always kind of thought of it this way, though. Like, the Marine Corps, it ends for all of us, and you either end it on your terms or the Marine Corps ends it on theirs. Like, one way or another. For everybody, at some point, the Marine Corps is going to say, hey, thanks for playing, but we don't really need you around here.
Right. The organization moves on, and as an organism, is the way that I look at it.
So for me personally, I just felt like, hey, I'd gotten to do way more than I ever thought I was going to do. It had been this awesome adventure. It had actually gone pretty well. It's like, just quit while you're ahead, man. Walk away. Like, let's just say thank you and go figure out what you're going to do next.
And so, what was the decision? So was there a moment? Was there a time frame, or was it just kind of this, like, water drip kind of that walked you towards it?
I sort of slowly was coming to the conclusion, like, this is what I want to do. But it was really at that point more about, like, home and our family. And there was a couple things, because our kids, they'd had it pretty good. I think they might not agree with me, but the idea of stabilizing them so they could go, especially our daughter at the time, she was our oldest, and I knew if I stayed in the Marine Corps, I was going to go to top level school, then go to some, like she was going to go to 3 or 4 different high schools. And the thought of doing that to her sounded just awful to me. I was like, you know what? She deserves to be in one place, go to high school with her friends, graduate, like have something resembling a normal life. So there was part of that, the desire to just sort of stabilize them. And I also had just sort of, I was in the very early stages of this, but I'd started reflecting a little bit on kind of who I was, who I'd become. And I knew, like, hey, out there, somewhere at the end of this road, there's some things that you need to go figure out for yourself. And I had this innate feeling that if I didn't do that, it could come back to haunt me. And it wasn't something that I talked about, and I didn't even really know how to articulate it. But I just had this kind of idea in my head, like I didn't want to end up being one of these combat vets who just goes off the rails one day and everyone's like, what the hell happened to that guy? He seemed like he totally had it together. But I knew enough about myself to know, like, that could happen to me.
Yeah.
If I don't do something. And I didn't even know what the something was at the time. It was just like, you should probably do something to figure this out. And so that was part of it also. It was like, you know, you should probably get started on that sooner rather than later. And kind of the handshake that I'd had with myself was, as long as I'm flying in the Marine Corps, don't even think about unpacking that, because this version of you that you become keeps you safe. It keeps all the other Marines around you safe. Like, that's just who you need to be. The day you're done with that, then you can go figure this other thing out. Yeah. So that was kind of the marker in the sand I had for myself. And so I decided, okay, yeah, I'm just doing it. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get out. I'm going to hopefully stabilize the kids, figure my own stuff out, figure out what I want to be when I grow up, like for my next career. I don't know.
Sometimes called the Marine Corps or the military is like a Peter Pan, right? It's like Never Never Land, right? Even though we're grown-ups, right? We're not in the real world as we joke about, right?
No, not at all. So I just decided that's what I wanted to do. Of course, I had to have a couple conversations with the colonel and a general or two about why I was making that decision. But in the end, they were great about it. And so, you know, put in all the associated paperwork, and I had 1 year left that I needed to serve to hit 20, and they allowed me to do that right there at Miramar at higher headquarters. So I went over to 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing after I gave up command and worked in the ops shop in the G3 for a year and got ready to get out, like got ready to transition.
Did you have, so for me, I remember my last patrol. Mm-hmm. So I was an instructor at that time, but I got a chance to put cami paint on and put a ruck on, and I was chasing students, and I was back in my element. I was hunting again. Did you have a last flight that you knew was going to be your last flight? So
I flew my last flight, and I did this intentionally. I decided my last flight was going to be my last flight as the commanding officer of the squadron of 462. Even though I was still on flight orders and eligible to fly after that, I just didn't want any part of being like the wing guy who comes down to the squadron
parachutes
for one last lap in the pattern. You know, like, I was like, I want to do it while I'm a contributing member of the squadron. So I decided my last flight as the commanding officer is going to be my last flight. And it wasn't anything special, the flight. And to be honest with you, at that point in my career, training flights were very boring for me. Yeah. Like, I'm doing all the combat stuff. Okay. But it was like, okay, we'll go out and do this one last time. Come back. All the Marines are waiting for you. They dump water and stuff on you.
No way.
Do like a little school circle and tell them thank you for everything. It's kind of like your unofficial send-off before the actual change of command ceremony. It's like a couple of days prior. So that was cool to do that and know, like, okay, that was it. Like, you just flew that thing for the last time, and then we're going to walk away and go do something different.
So do you fly at all now?
Nope.
So that was your last time?
That was it. That was the last time I ever flew.
You know, I'm the same way, you know, with you know, long range shooting or any of that. It's just, it's not really my hobby. I don't look down on it or anything like that. Yeah. I just don't shoot very much anymore. So really the last time I was behind a bolt gun or the last time I was behind an assault rifle was really the last time that I was in the service. I don't really I had done it so long for, you know, it's one of those things that I very much like having it as that was the Marines. That was my time. That was the thing that I did then. And I can feel the same thing with you and aviation. Not a loaded question, but do you ever miss it? Do you ever miss flying? Do you ever miss being in that space?
No, honestly, I haven't. And I've had several people ask me that. And I know I'm an unusual case. in this the way my brain works, because I have several friends and peers who are like, they just love to fly. They want to be in the air. They've gone on to careers in airlines and flying helicopters, doing all kinds of stuff. But I actually haven't. It was like in that time, that place, I loved it, but it can only be that way in that time and in that place. Like there is no recreating that. Like
You're always chasing that thing that you can never get back.
I know there's no way to recreate that. No matter what type of aircraft I go strap myself into as a civilian and tool around, it's just not going to be the same thing. It's just not. And that's okay. And I'm okay with that. So I'm perfectly content to just leave it back there where it is, perfectly preserved in this way that I remember it, and just not mess with it.
I appreciate that. I resonate a lot with that. I think it's actually it's comforting for me. I've had a lot of moments where I've second guessed myself, like, why don't I love doing this? Why don't I go into this, another career that continues down that pathway or continues the same thing that I was doing? But hearing your story helps, validate my own experience and say like, no, it's okay that was a different chapter.
Yeah, it was totally time, place, and chapter. And I really think of it at this point, like my life has been 3 chapters. There's everything that happened before I was in the Marine Corps. Then there's the Marine Corps. And then chapter 3 is like still being written. That's like what happens after the Marine Corps. It's kind of how I think of it, for sure.
Was there so you've been retired for 4 years now?
No, almost 8.
Was there a reinvention? Was there
Totally
an ego death? Was there, because you're retiring as lieutenant colonel, post command, right? What was that process like for you?
So I just, I could talk about transition forever, but I knew what I wanted to do, and sort of on par for me. I wanted to do something that was call it unusual. Some of my background, you're supposed to either be an airline pilot or fly helicopters or work for Lockheed, Northrop, whoever, right? DoD company X, pick one. I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to go into the business world, and the thing that I had come to love the most about the Marine Corps was the Marines, the leadership piece. And I was really curious to know, like, can you go into a civilian company and apply some of these principles and be successful? Or is just everyone going to think you're crazy and laugh at you? And it's just not going to work, right? It was like this experiment that I was hell-bent on conducting for myself. Like, I want to go find out if I can do this or if this works. And so that's really kind of what I set my sights on. And, I did all the things you're supposed to, the transition classes and networking, et cetera. But that's what I ended up doing, was networking my way into a chief operating officer job with a manufacturing company, and did that and learned some things. And certainly didn't do it all perfectly, but it was a great experience. And I was like, all right, well, I learned there, and I'm going to go start my own consulting company. Then did that, and accidentally took another job because I did a project for this other company, and then they hired me. And it's just been like kind of this, I won't say meandering, but I've really enjoyed just kind of diving into this business world and learning some different industries and meeting different people, and really at the same time applying essentially a lot of what I learned in the Marine Corps. And kind of to your original question, I still have this leadership class I give now as part of my consulting company, and I've given it companies I've actually worked at, where I start out by saying, like, as a leader, it's not about you. And the most important thing that I have to understand as a leader is this. Like, I'm a former lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. I've been the chief operating officer of a couple companies. Guess what? Nobody cares. No. It means nothing.
Yeah.
Like, it means absolutely nothing. All that gets me is what I call courtesy. People are more likely to be nice to my face. But actual respect and trust, I have to earn that. That's on me, not the people I'm leading. So if we all approach it that way, we're going to probably be successful. And it's the same way you learn how to lead in the Marine Corps, right? I mean, that's really the approach. And so I just try to apply that to everything that I do. Like, no matter what position I'm in, my job is to put these other people in a position to be successful, and then give them every tool I can scrape together to give them so they can actually do it. And any success I have is a byproduct of them, not me.
I found that lesson resonated throughout the book. Yeah. And so that was from the very first, Marine influence that you ever had, was someone just dropping the idea into your head and then allowing you the space to be able to make that come to fruition, and then supporting you along the way, to the first majors, to the majors and captains that you served with during the service, to leadership that you had. And then even at the end of your story was this idea of it's very clear to me that you have served for the idea of serving other people. It's not just
For
serving your
sure.
country, it's
Yeah.
serving other people along the way.
Yeah. It's 100% about the other people. And to this day, that is definitely still how I function. Just as a human.
Yeah.
Is like, it's important to me to spend my time doing things that are in some way helpful to others, in some way help someone else get ahead, improve, accomplish something they're trying to accomplish. That's the thing that I enjoy doing. And I'm also someone who tends to mostly live in the present and future. I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on the past, positive or negative.
4 missed baskets in
Yeah, whatever.
2000.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah. Browner still gives me a hard time about that. But it's just like, what can you do to help somebody else? Like, are you functioning in a way as a human that's helpful to other people? And none of us are going to get that perfectly, but I try to do that even with volunteer time. I spend like, okay, what am I spend my time on? If I'm do some volunteer time, how does this help vets or someone I care about? Okay, yeah, let's go do that.
So I'll go back to the original kind of question that we circled on early on was, what made you want to write this book? And do you feel that you accomplished what you wanted to?
It was really just to in some way be helpful to, frankly, my peers, other people I served with, other veterans, and maybe to some extent their families. And I actually wrote it in a prologue, but if this helps one person, it's worth it. But it's been really neat and very rewarding for me. Just, once it's out there and it's published, you'll have the same experience. But it's just, you start getting these random notes from people. And before that starts, it's kind of scary. There's like a little quiet period where like it's published and no one's saying anything. And so you're like, is anyone even reading it? Did anyone buy it? Like, does anyone know what's going on? And then you quickly realize after a few days, like, yes, people will start to interact with you. But just getting those first few notes back that were saying things like, hey, thanks for writing this. Now I know I'm not the only one that has felt these, some of these things. Or, hey, thanks for writing this. I don't know how to talk about, like I had a few people reach out and say, hey, thanks for writing this. I don't know how to talk about these things. So I just gave this to my wife to read and said like, hey, read this. Then you'll kind of understand what's going on in my head.
Right. Like I can't enunciate it. I can't figure out how to articulate this. Right.
But the ones that were the most rewarding was actually, and at this point I've gotten many, many interactions with people, but the ones that I think are the most rewarding are ones I got from spouses. Like these are women, I don't know them personally at all, but just saying, hey, thank you for writing this. My husband can't talk about these things, but someone told me about this book. I read it and now I have a much better understanding of what's going on with him. So thanks. Like that to me is like totally 100% worth it. And on a personal level, it wasn't an easy decision to make the story as personal as I did. Mm. And I will tell you we had some challenging conversations at our house about whether or not I should do that. And Carrie had reservations about it, in fairness, right? Because that's her life too, that I'm putting out there. But I just told her at the time, like, I feel strongly like this is the only way to do this. If it's going to really be real and have the effect that I'm hoping it's going to have, you got to put it all in there because it's all part of the experience. And she reluctantly agreed. I think it's probably a fair way to say it. And so I did, but when you do it, you're like, I'm kind of rolling the dice on this. I don't know what's going to happen.
When you write a book that is as authentic as yours and tells as much of your story and exposes as much of your entire life, your thought process, your feelings, it's extremely vulnerable.
Totally.
And that's not something that is easily understood by people who haven't exposed themselves like this.
Yeah.
And so I'm really, really glad that you've gotten some really positive feedback from that because as soon I read every book for any person that comes on the show, I read every single book. I have thoroughly enjoyed reading through yours because I found even as a non-pilot, I was able to resonate with the same lessons, the same feelings, the same consternation with higher command at times, the same, laughable associations with field grade officers. This is a real account. This is an authentic account of what it's like to serve. And I can only imagine all of the young lieutenants that would be reading that are looking for what it's like, for what are the possibilities, what can happen. This is to me a roadmap for a lot of people and saying like it is doable. Some kid from Lubbock, Texas can look at a T-37
T-37
and say, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
and then come 20 some odd years later, have not only done it at the top of their game, and then written a book that isn't talking about how great they are. It's a book talking about how great everyone else was and how amazing their journey was because of other people.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Absolutely. I mean, and you alluded to it at the very beginning, but that was, kind of why I wrote that. And the dedication to the Marines was kind of like telling them all, like, hey, thank you. Like, that's what made the experience for me, was just being part of that cadre of Marines. And that wasn't specific to rank, it was specific to MOS. I mean, to this day, I'm the most comfortable in a group of current or former Marines. Like,
it's a weird thing.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. Like I said before, the beginning of the book felt like a love letter to Marines, just saying thank you for impacting me more than I ever impacted you.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's absolutely one of the best books I've read in a very, very long time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. It's been awesome talking through it all.
Again, Isaac Lee, retired Lieutenant Colonel, United States Marines. The only book that I've ever read on CH-53s, and I cannot recommend this book enough. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sitting and talk with us. I really do appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you.